Mutsi from ECM.
Good morning, I'm Catherine Tsoka from Department of Nutrition.
We have competition with the room next to us. I could hear that room more than I could hear some of you, so please, Ndifuna Kudziwani, speak. My name is Stacia Nordine, and I work with Food Systems Transformation for One Health. Thank you.
So I'm just Chitonde working with the CISANET.
Thank you very much, colleagues, and we really appreciate for taking time to introduce yourselves. So once again, I will kindly request all of us to be free, interact, exchange, because we're here for a dialogue. Tiripano Gambiana want to dialogue on a very important issue, which is about the right to food. In a nutshell, the main reason why we're here is that we have some voluntary guidelines that were developed with support from the UN on the right to food, and this was like 20 years ago. And we are here to reflect on the progress which we have made as a country in incorporating these guidelines into our national policies, strategies, as well as our legal frameworks. As we are reflecting on this, we also pretty much aware about our story as Malawi. We've been failing to break our food insecurity cycle. We're still singing the same song up to date. I think as we speak, and based on the figures that were also published by UNICEF, at the moment about 9 million people are still in need of food. They have acute shortage of food, and 4.5 million of these are children. That means there's still more work that needs to be done. And we'll be here to reflect on some of these things to say, why are we stuck to date? What is it that we've been able to do better? How can we scale up that? How is our level of coordination? How can we make sure that we accelerate our efforts and make sure we do more than we have done before? So in a nutshell, this is why we're here. And the Right to Food Coalition will be introduced a little later. But basically, I'm also comfortable to say this is an initiative which has emanated from one of the initiatives which CISANET is implementing, the Strengthening Rural Governance for the Right to Adequate Food for All project. And that has really also helped to stir debate, but also come up with several initiatives which have really helped us to make slight progress on this topic. We are also pretty much aware that as a country, we have developed a number of policy instruments which are somehow speaking to this topic, but there is somehow general consensus that we still have got gaps, and we can really improve certain things in our documentation, including also how some of these things are being addressed by our constitution. There are gaps, but we'll have experts that will be talking to these issues, and I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to engage and exchange so that we can delve deeper and also get more understanding as to where we are and how best we can be part and parcel of the process. So welcoming you once again, and please, let's contribute. This is not like a one-way traffic engagement. We are also counting on your knowledge, your wisdom, whatever information you have, so that we can really help to put things into motion. So mwachidule nkhani yake ndimene yokuti tikambirana nkhani izi tenti masuke tonse titengepo gawo zaka 20 zapitazo dziko la Malawi lidagwirizana nawo ndithu kuti likhale pa ndondomeko imodzi yofuna kuonetsetsa kuti pakhale ufulu wapaderadera okhudzana ndi nkhani ya zakudyayi. ndeno patatha zaka 20 chikonzereni ndondomeko zimenezi tikuyang'ana kuti kodi zatithandiza ngati dziko ndi madera amene tachita bwino ndi pati pamene tikutsalira. Takonza ndondomeko zosiyanasiyana zimene zimatithandiza ngati dziko kumafunso nkumati kodi nzokwanira kapena pena ndi pena pafunika titakonza malamulo athu akulu amene timati constitution kodi akukamba nkhani mwachindunji mwamvemvemve kapena pena ndi pena zikusowekera. So tikhala tikumaonekera madera onsewo ndi kuona kuti kodi ife ngati anthu eni ache tingatengepo gawo bwanji kuti tionetsetse kuti nkhani imene yachakudyayi tikusuntha monga mukudziwa kuti nkhani ya njala sikutichoka kwathu kuno. Chaka chino anthu 9 million akusowekabe chakudya komanso 4.5 million malinga ndi UNICEF ndi ana. Kodi nkhani ngati zimene zingathe bwanji? Komanso mukumbukira bwino lomwe kuti dziko la Malawi lakhala likukhudzidwa ndi nkhani ya ngozi zogwa mwadzidzidzi chifukwa cha nkhani yakusintha kwa nyengo zimene zokhala zopangitsa kuti zimene timakolola ndi kupanga ngati dziko zizilowa pansi. So tikupempheni kuti timasuke musakhale chete chifukwa mukakhala chete palibe atayankhule msonkhanowu wakonzedwera inu nomwe. So ndimati ntero poyamba pake. Otherwise, at this point in time, allow me to invite the acting national director, Elizabeth Namawana, to come forward and deliver her welcoming remarks. A round of applause for her, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, sir. Honor to Justice Kapindu, our keynote speaker Habiba Osman, the Executive Secretary for Malawi Human Rights Commission, Mr. Doshani Kadokera from the Ministry of Agriculture, the WHH Country Director Claudio Pallock, CISANET members, all coalition members, our tradition leaders here present, the media team, the most important, vibrant team in the room. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. With me here, I have a few opening remarks to make. As we know that food and nutrition security exists when all people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to food, which is supposed to be safe and consumed in sufficient quantity and quality to meet their dietary needs. As the Civil Society Agriculture Network, the Secretariat for the Coalition, we believe that Malawians have a fundamental right to be free from hunger, and that starving them is a gross denial and violation of their right. We would like to see farming communities and Malawians in general having regular and unrestricted access to quantitatively and qualitatively adequate food. Notwithstanding, persons living in conditions of poverty and hunger have often been found to be suffering from prolonged malnutrition. Even when their deaths could not in strictly clinical terms be related to starvations, the tragic reality remained that they often died of prolonged malnutrition and a continuum of distress. We therefore found merit in the view of this coalition that there is a need for a paradigm shift in public policies such as the National Resilience Strategy, the National Agriculture Policy, and the Food Security Policy and others. That this shift had to be made from the domain of benevolence to that of the right to food for every Malawian. Today, as we are discussing promoting human rights-based programming and financing for food and nutrition security, let's zero in more on how we can increase the awareness of these policies and how we can increase public investment towards transforming the food and nutrition security in Malawi. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to today's dialogue to change the narrative of 20 years later and still hungry. It's very shameful as a country. Therefore, it starts with us being committed to rethink the vision and to be committed to forward. Thank you so much for listening.
Maybe she deserves a better round of applause. Is that so? All right. Thank you so much indeed, Elizabeth, for those interesting remarks, setting the scene for our dialogue this morning. Without wasting much of our time, allow me now to invite Claudia to come in front to speak on behalf of the BHH, and then later on we shall also invite the next speaker. Ajanalia namaona atiankula mwaveka bwino. So pano titanena so atiankule awandi my Claudia kuimira bunge la BHH. Thank you very much.
Good morning. A small correction, I'm the head of programs of WHH. We are awaiting the arrival of a new country director at the moment, so I'm filling in this gap partially. Well, thank you very much for joining us here this morning. It is very appreciated that to see you here, also from different districts and communities, different actors. So, honorable guests and esteemed colleagues and friends, it is with great honor that I stand before you today to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the UN Voluntary Guidelines on the Right to Food. This momentous occasion gives us the opportunity to reflect on the progress made and the challenges that remain in ensuring the fundamental human right to food for all. In the 20 years that have passed since the adoption of the guidelines, they have become a cornerstone in framing national and international policies alike. So these guidelines have laid the foundation for a human rights-based approach to food security, striving to address not just hunger, but also access to adequate, safe, nutritious food for everyone. However, as we are gathering here today, we are reminded that the journey is far from over, just as Elizabeth just mentioned. In many countries, including here in Malawi, food insecurity remains a persistent challenge, exacerbated by climate change, economic instability, and other external shocks. As of last year, millions of people were facing high levels of acute food insecurity, with vulnerable groups such as children suffering the most. While Malawi has embraced the right to food through its participation in international agreements, gaps in policy implementation and coherence have hindered substantial progress. This anniversary serves as a call to action. We must renew our commitment to advancing the right to food through comprehensive policy frameworks, increased public investment and political will, the latter more than anything else. It is our collective responsibility to turn these guidelines into tangible outcomes that ensure that every person has access to food and the means to secure their own livelihoods. Today, let's look us into the future. We must build inclusive, resilient, and sustainable food systems that leave no one behind. This is particularly important as we are discussing Malawi 2063 implementation. I encourage us all to engage fully in this dialogue, share experiences, and shape the roadmap for the next phase of food systems transformation. It is my sincere wish that we do not only talk today, but also speak out critically and trying to move things forward in Malawi. There are many workshops like this happening, addressing almost the same topic but from a different angle, but yet progress is very, very slow. And I think us as civil society in this, we have a specific role to play, and we can catalyze this process. And this is where I really would like to address every one of you who is here today, also to raise critical voices and make those critical voices heard. And not only to stay here in this very nice setup in the panel discussion, but also to take it a step beyond. And when we are leaving here today, that these actions that we are discussing today, that we make a collective push to turn them into reality and pushing the right buttons in a critical but constructive way. So have a good day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Claudia, for your remarks. May we give her another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. So anamba mwina ndungo fotokoza kuti wangokirizira udindo na wankulu wa bunge limeneli komano wankulu wa bunge limeneli afika ndithu iwo ndi nkulu amene amuona za ntchito kapena head of programs koma mwachidwe kwambiri chimene amatsinjika nchonena kuti tikondwerere kuti patha zaka 20 titakonza ndondomeko zimene zimatipatsa mphamvu kuti tikhoza kumayionanso nkhani zakudyayi kuchokera ku ngodya yokhuzana ndi maufulu osiyanasiyana. Amagwirizananso ndi Elizabeth namaona anayankhula poyamba aja kuti zooneka kuti pena ndi pena zikuyenda koma pena mavutonso akadalipo kamba kuti anthu anjala akadalipo ochuluka komanso ana ndi amene akhudzidwa kwambiri. Ndi chikhulupiriro kuti pafunika titaonjezera moto kumbali ngati ya ntchito zosiyanasiyana zimene mwina mabungwe kampani zingachite poonetsetsa kuti nkhani imene ya kapangidwe ka zakudya kwathu kuno ikhale ngati yasintha. Akudziwa kuti zokhala ngati kuti nkhani yake tubwereza popeza timakumana koma akuona kuti msonkhano ungofunikira kwambiri chifukwa choti talunjika kwambiri pa nkhani ya ufulu. So mwina pamenepo atipemphanso tonse timasuke kuti titengepo gawo. So mwachidule kwambiri kuyankhula kwawo kunali kotero ndithu pofuna kuonetsetsa kuti tonse tikuyendera limodzi. So thank you very much once again to our speakers, and before we invite our keynote speaker for this dialogue, it is my privilege to invite Masiko to come forward to zero in now on the specific objectives of this dialogue so that no one is left behind. So please, Masiko, come forward and present to us the specific objectives of this dialogue and what is it that we are expecting by the end of the day. Because sometimes as civil society organizations, we have been always accused of talking too much and also doing less. So we need to understand what is it that is going to happen after we have engaged in this dialogue. Thank you very much indeed. A hand for him, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I will say that again. I hope you are ready this time. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Wow, there are still some unresponsive people. All right, it's okay. I'm Maziko Nkulembe. I work for the Civil Society Agriculture Network, but I'm also the secretary for the Right to Food Coalition. I want to, first of all, introduce to you the Right to Food Coalition, the organizers of this big event, and then to talk a bit about the objectives of the meeting today. So, magogo ndi abwenzena onse ndikamba pang'ono za bungwe la Right to Food limene latitanira pano komanso kunena kuti kodi pamalo pano tabwera kudzatani. So mwachidule kwambiri nkhani ya ufulu okhala ndi chakudya, the right to food, imanena kuti imakwaniritsidwa pamene munthu ina aliyense, wamuna, wamkazi, kapena mwana, mwina payekha kapena limodzi ngati gulu, ali ndi kuthekera kokapeza chakudya, mwina chakudya chenichenicho, kapenanso njira zokhoza kuchikwanitsira, mwina mwachitsanzo ndalama, komanso chakudyacho chikupezeka nthawi zonse, komanso chimene chili chokwanira. Nawo nkhani ya chokwanira ikutanthauza kunena kuti tikuyang'ana kukwanira kuti ukhute, number 1. Number 2, kukwanira kuti chifikire zosowa za mthupi mwako. podziwa kuti anthu feti makhandi zosowa zosiyana-siyana malinga ndi msinkhu wathu, malingana ndi ntchito zimene timagwira, malingana ndi dera limene timakhala, komanso kukwanira kukutanthauzaso kuti tilingalire mbali zimene mwina tekeze chikhalidwe, kunena kuti mmene amadyera anthu ambali mwa nyanja zimasiyana ndi anthu amene akukhala madera ngati kumchinji, anthu amene amakhala kunkhotakota zimene amakonda zimasiyana ndi anthu akunsanje. So chokwanira chawa kunsanje chikuyeneranso chisiyane ndi chokwanira chawa ku nkhotakota. Ndikupe ati limodzi kufika pamenepo. So nkhani ya Right to Food Coalition ndi gulu la mabungwe amene ndi siaboma koma kugwira ntchito zolimbikitsa kupezeka kwa chakudya chokwanira komanso kadyedwe koyenerera Malawi muno, food and nutrition security. Coalition imeneyi inayamba mu chaka cha 2021 ngati mwana wa project ina imene mabungwe angapo akuyendetsa mwachidule, project imachedwa kulimbikitsa utsogoleri wabwino pa nkhani ya ufulu okhala ndi chakudya kwa makamaka ku maboma ang'onoang'ono. So it is called the Strengthening Rural Governance for the Right to Food project, imene tikupanga implement pa national level kugwira ntchito ndi kulikulu la boma ndi atenga mbali ena osiyana-siyana, komanso tikayang'ana pa boma pa district level tikugwira ntchito ndi boma pa level imeneyo. So office ya DC, ya DPD, bwana Binawo ndi ena akuluakulu ma directors osiyana-siyana amenenso ena mwayo tili nawo mwamuno. Tikapita ku community tikugwira ntchito ndi mafumu ndi dindo osiyana-siyana, ndi community imene tikugwirako ntchito ndi kwa senior chief Lulanga amenenso tili nawonso mwamuno, tiyapatsa nthawi inake kuti adzatiyankhule. Now project imene tikuchita ife ya CISANET limodzi ndi bungwe lina lotchedwa CISAT, Center for Social Accountability and Transparency, komanso tikuchita ndi bungwe la WHH lotunga Hilfe ndi thandizo la ndalama zochokera ku boma la Germany. So masomphenya athu akulu ndionena kuti tikuyang'anira nthawi imene tidzafike kuti Amalawi onse nkhani ya chakudya ndi kadyedwe koyenerera ndi kotsimikizika kwa Malawi ina aliyense, zimene zikubwera kudzera mu kusanthulika kwa njira zimene timagwiritsa ntchito kuti tikhalire ndi chakudya komanso chikhale chosamalika. Mwa njira ina guaranteeing Malawians of food and nutrition security through transformative food systems, or a transformative food system which is anchored by a right to food law. So muona kunena kuti ziyang'aniro zathu ndingodutsa mwachidule nzothandizira kunena kuti number 1 tiyang'ane kuti tinganenere bwanji kapena tingayankhule bwanji malo mwa anthu osiyana-siyana amene tikuwayimirira pa nkhani yokuzana ndi ma policies kapena zimene zimatchedwa ndondomeko za boma, komanso mofunikira kwambiri malamulo amene mwina alipo koma sakugwiritsidwa ntchito kapena palibe akuyenera akhalepo okuzana ndi nkhani ya ufulu okhala ndi chakudya. Chachiwiri ndikuthandizira kuti anthu ambiri adziwe za nkhani imene yofunikira kuti akhoza kutenga nawo mbali bwino komanso moyenerera. Chachitatu ndikulimbikitsa kulumikizana kugwirira ntchito limodzi kwa atenga mbali osiyana-siyana kuti ndalama zimene zimakhalapo, upangiri umene umakhalapo, nthawi imene tikugwiritsa ntchito komanso anthu amene tikuwafikira kumudzi kuja tizitha tonse kupindula limodzi, tikuyendera limodzi pa ulendowo. Mbali ina yachinayi ndiyolimbikitsa kafukufuku komanso kugawana kwa zotsatira za kafukufukuyo mokuzana ndi nkhani ya kulimbikitsa kadyedwe koyenerera komanso nkhani ya kupezeka kwa chakudya mosavutikira. Ende kumapeto kwake ndi nkhani yothandizira kuti pakhale kalondolondo oyenerera kapena sokhazikika, monitoring and evaluation, kuonesesa kuti ntchito zija tikamagwira kodi zotsatira zake zikubwera bwanji, nanga zotsatira zija zikutiuza chani, ndi ziti zimene tikuyenera tizilimbikitse, ndi ziti zimene tikuyenera tipangenso mwatsopano kuti zithandizire kuti tikafikire ziyang'aniro zathu pa nthawi yabwino komanso nthawi yoyenerera. Ena mwa members a coalition ndi amenewo, koma pali ena amene sindinakwanitse kuwayika chifukwa chonena kuti ena ndi anthu opanga join paokha kunena kuti mwina amagwira ntchito za kadyedwe koyenerera afuna kukhala mbali imodzi ya gulu limeneli, ndi mamembers inso a gululi. Now chifukwa chimene tabwerera pamalo pano chayikidwa mu mfundo zinayi zotsatirazi, ndipo ndizinena mwansanga koma momveka bwino kunena kuti choyamba tikuyang'anira kunena kuti tikhale ndi bwalo limene ndi la lero lino limene tibweretsa atenga mbali osiyana-siyana kuchokera mbali zosiyana-siyana. Tili ndi akuluakulu akuboma, tili ndi akuluakulu amabungwe amene ndi aboma, mwachisanzo lendo athu olemekezeka mayi Osman, komanso tili ndi mafumu mwachisanzo senior chief Lulanga ndi timu yawo amene abwerera, tili ndi atenga mbali aboma koma pa district level, tili ndi mabungwe amene si aboma ndi ena anthu osiyana-siyana. Chiyang'aniro chathu nchokuti tibwere pamodzi tigawane zinthu zimene takhala tikuphunzira, to share our experiences and our learnings in the process. Koma chachiwiri ndichokuti tilingalire mmene munamvera pa zimene ananena oyankhula awiri apita aja, amakamba kunena kuti papita zaka 20 chikazikisireni ndondomeko zothandizira maboma kunena kuti angachite bwanji kuti akhale ndi ufulu okhala ndi chakudya, the voluntary guidelines on the right to food. So tifuna tiyang'ane kuti chikhazikisire ndondomeko zimenezi ngati dziko la Malawi, kodi ndi ziti zimene tachita bwino, ndi ziti zimene zikuyenda, komanso ndi ziti zimene sizikulongosoka. Ndiganizo lonena kuti tikaona zimene zichi zitithandizire no kuyamba kuyang'ana chitsogolo. So chachitatu ndikufuna kuti nkhani ya ufulu wa chakudya kwa wina aliyense tilimbikitse ikhale yomveka bwino, komanso tilumikize bwino lomwe ndi nkhani ya food system transformation, kusintha kwa njira zimene timagwiritsa ntchito popezera chakudya komanso kuchisamalira mu dziko lino la Malawi. Koma kumapeto kwa zonse tifuna tiyang'ane kuti kodi tikupereka ziyamikiro za mtundu wanji, what recommendations are we giving, zimene chifukwa choti zikuchokera kwa tonsefe mmene tilili muno ndi ntchito zosiyanasiyana zimene timagwira, tiziyang'anira zimene titamve akuluakulu akamakambirana apa, komanso zimene ife tikudziwa ndi experience yathu, tizitenga zimene zija tizimangire pamodzi. Tikamatuluka muno tifuna aliyense anyamule mtolo wa saizi yake, kuti inde izi tikupanga zikuyenda, izi sizikuyenda, koma kuti tisinthe zinthu tikuyenera tiyambe kupanga izi kuyang'anira osangoti zaka ziwiri zikubwerazi, kwa mwina mpaka na zaka 10 zimene zikubwera kutsogolo kwathu. Tikatero tikhala kuti takwanisa chiyang'aniro chathu cha msonkhano wa tsiku la lero. Ndikukupemphani kunena kuti tabwerani titenge mbali limodzi ngati mamembala a Right to Food Coalition. Ndanenera moja ndiotsegula kwa wina aliyense amene afuna kukhala nawo memba, ndikugwira nawo ntchito yofunikira iyi, ndikuyitanira ndi mwanjira yapadera, mukhoza ndipeza ine, mukhoza kuwapeza achairperson athu bwana Akambwiri. Pepani ndikupemphani kuti mungoyimirira bwana, Mungu achita choncho anthu. Mkulu wathu wa bungwe limeneli ndi ameneyo bwana Alfred Kambwiri, mukhoza kuwapeza iwowo kapena wina aliyense amene mumuone kuti akuthamangathamanga, akulozerani kwa inerera kuti ntchito imene tizigwirira limodzi kupita kutsogolo. Zikomo kwambiri chifukwa cha kumvetsera kwanu, Ambuye akudalitseni.
Thank you very much, Maziko. Tenti muombele somanja wayankhula bwino kwa basi. At this point in time, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite our keynote speaker, a very prolific woman we have known for quite some time, Madame Habiba Hausman, who is also our guest of honor. She is the executive secretary for the Malawi Human Rights Commission. A huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, as Madame Habiba Hausman will be taking up the podium. Thank you very much indeed, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Master of Ceremonies. Justice Kabindo from the High Court, the CISANET Acting National Director, Madam Elizabeth Namaona, all CISANET members, the coalition members, WHH representation, Ms. Claudia Pallock, representative from the Ministry of Agriculture, our distinguished traditional leaders, members from the National Planning Commission, my colleagues from the Human Rights Commission, and members of the media, and also religious leaders, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for according me this opportunity. Maybe I can use this. To come here today for this very important dialogue. Just out of interest, I want to find out how many people have seen the newspaper today. Just out of interest, this morning, today's paper. It's very important that we should be following what is happening in the news. Anyone? Have we seen today's paper? Unless maybe I'm wrong, but today is Wednesday, 18th, no? So, pardon? Rising prices hit consumer hard. Okay, but there's one on the Daily Times that says tough times for farmers, and on the sideline there is food nutrition bill drags for 21 years. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think this is a timely dialogue. And the very fact that we have this in the newspapers today is a testament of the fact that I think these conversations are long overdue. That said, good morning once again. Permit me to thank the Right to Food Coalition for organizing this critical and timely event where we have gathered to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the adoption of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations Voluntary Guidelines to support progressive realization of the right to adequate food in the context of national food security, commonly known as the Voluntary Guidelines on the Right to Food. When I was really browsing through the notes and also looking at the literature and the work that has been done, history reminds us that the right to food, as well as the law, is a fundamental right, as has been stressed by previous speakers. Again, this has also been affirmed in international law too. And in addition, when you think about it in terms of layman's perspective, the right to food is the right to feed oneself in dignity, but it is also the right to have continuous access to resources that will enable you to produce, earn, or purchase enough food to not only prevent hunger, but also to ensure health and well-being. So it is really fundamental when you look at the context. The United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights has also helped to elaborate some key values. Specifically, when you look at Article 25, it recognizes that the right to food is one of the fundamental human rights, and through the International Covenant on the Economic, Social, Cultural Rights, the UN member states, including Malawi, have recognized that right to food as a basic human right under international law. And it has given legal obligations to states to respect, to protect, and fulfill. And so this means that the right to food should be adequate, available, and accessible. And then again, we must also have the right to determine as individuals, as citizens, other important issues, for example, access to land and water, but also there must be economic accessibility for everyone. That includes also having fair markets and physically accessing these issues, and also making sure that there is inclusivity. So for example, the Covenant in Article 11 provides that state parties shall recognize the right of everyone to adequate standard of living, which shall include the right to adequate food and continuous improvement of living conditions, that state parties will take appropriate steps to ensure the realization of this right. And then again, we need to continuously ask ourselves, when the United Nations Committee on the International Covenant on Economic Social Rights were really making their recommendations, especially under General Comment number 12 on the right to food, they elaborated that the right to food is realized when every man, woman, and child alone, or in a community with others, has physical, economic access at all times to adequate food and means for its procurement. I guess in 2024, this is still a huge problem and a debate. And additionally, the Committee on International Covenant on Cultural Rights has gone further to expound that the right to food has two aspects. Firstly, the right to be free from hunger, which is a minimum core obligation of the state parties to the covenant. And secondly, the right to be able to feed oneself in a balanced way through one's efforts. And when we delve back to the voluntary guidelines on the right to food, which we are commemorating as well, they were also adopted by the UN Food and Agriculture Organizations in November 2004. This adoption was after 2 years of intense and constructive negotiations. I'm sure FAO will be able to take us through the presentation. And when you look at the voluntary guidelines on the right to food, they do represent actually a first attempt at international level by states to interpret an economic, social, and cultural rights and recommend actions to be undertaken for its realization. So the objectives of the voluntary guidelines is to provide at least practical guidance to state parties in their implementation of the progressive realization of the rights and in the context of national food security. The voluntary guidelines also cover the full range of actions to be considered by states at the national level in order to build an enabling environment for people to feed themselves in dignity and to establish appropriate safety nets for those who are unable to do so. Again, it can be said and argued that they also help to strengthen and improve a state's development frameworks, particularly with a regard to social and human rights dimensions, by putting entitlements of people at the center of development. So, ladies and gentlemen, the voluntary guidance are voluntary and are not mandatory. Perhaps maybe that's where the challenge begins. However, by following their provisions, states can plan and implement and monitor policies and programs on food security, which leads to increased agricultural productivity, reduced poverty, and consequently increased availability and accessibility to food, hence creating a cycle of food security. Looking at the global and regional context on the right to food, according to UN Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, in their recent report in 2024 on the state of food and nutrition in the world is still far off track to achieve sustainable development goals, particularly 2 on zero hunger by 2030. This is also because of the continued prevalence of undernourishment, whereby between 713 and 757 million people faced hunger in 2023, or about 1 out of 11 people in the world, or in the case of Africa, have faced hunger. And the figure is alarming in Africa, where it says at least 1 out of every 5 people. Hunger is still on the rise in Africa, including here in Malawi. I'm sure we have also seen the news and we have also heard what is happening in other districts. And it has remained relatively unchanged in Asia as well, while notable progress has been made at least in Latin America and the Caribbean. However, progress towards the broader global goal of ensuring regular access to adequate food for all has stalled. And the prevalence of food insecurity in 2023 was actually estimated at 28.9% of the global population. And this is something to keep in mind, that whenever there is hunger, there is also politicization of the issue. And as such, lack of improvement in food security and even progress in economic access to healthy diets is also casting a shadow over the possibility of achieving zero hunger in the world, with only 6 years to go till the 2030 deadline. So, ladies and gentlemen, at the regional level, the prices of food in respective local currencies have also started falling. For example, Zambia and Zimbabwe. However, Malawi continues to face challenges of constrained food supply. And in general, grain prices remain high in most Southern African countries due to microeconomic challenges and the aftermath of the Cyclone Freddy and El Nino indeed induced drought. And locally, over the past few years, Malawi's food and nutrition security status has also been negatively affected by the series of climate shocks, as mentioned. UNICEF has reported, for example, that 4.9 people were facing acute shortage of food, and 4.5 million are in need of humanitarian assistance because they've been affected by the floods. Even the Food Security Monitor of 2024 also revealed that food crisis conditions are expected in southern parts of the country, with a lean season humanitarian assistance likely to begin in September this month. So the report estimates that about 37.57% of the population of 6.8 million people will have insufficient food. So although Malawi itself has a comprehensive set of policies, strategies, and programs, as mentioned, food security, which governs the country's food systems, is still being challenged by these problems. However, I would also want to say that just as the coalition has noted, there is limited stakeholder awareness and low public investment and lack of demonstrable political will on the instruments that are being rendered ineffective in turning around the food and nutrition secure situation. I'm sure we'll go through all those security, we'll go all through those policy instruments. That said, the government should be commended for the significant effort it has demonstrated over the years through the implementation of public sector programs such as the FISP and AIP, as well as other numerous security programs for vulnerable farmers. But today's newspaper is also very interesting. That's why it's very important that we go through it. So as pointed out, despite Malawi having some progressive policies, to date, the Food and Nutrition Bill, again, it has taken 21 years, hasn't been enacted into law. Yet the bill came as a recommendation from the UN Special Rapporteur to Food, and it remains idle. And it is very interesting when you look at the argument in the newspaper. It says the Minister of Justice, Minister of Health, so there is the back and forth. And I suppose this dialogue should also help us to see which will be the stakeholder that will be pushing this and how we can work with all stakeholders in that regard. For the Commission on its part, constitutionally and statutorily mandated with the promotion and protection of human rights, we have since 1998 conducted programming towards ensuring the right to food is indeed realized in Malawi and for all Malawians, and that human rights violations and abuses relating to the right to food are mitigated and remedied. Last year, the Commission, for example, submitted to the UN Committee on the International Covenant on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights that while Malawi has progressively developed policies to safeguard the right to an adequate standard of living, the majority of Malawians are still languishing in poverty and do not enjoy basic needs as the right to adequate food and nutrition. If you want to access this report, it's actually online. And with regards to the Affordable Inputs Program, for example, the Commission also did its own assessment. And despite the successes of the program, such as the increase in the number of beneficiaries and subsequent increase in maize production, the program has been marred with several challenges. And we recommended that the government should strive to make the program more human rights based so that it focuses on most vulnerable, poor subsistence farmers, and the program should not be politicized. So the Commission is conducting further an assessment of the country's food situation at the moment to determine the extent to which the food situation affects households in the country. Through this assessment, the Commission established that the country is food insecure, and the most vulnerable communities are eating wild tubers in some districts of the country. And recently, the Commission has noted, for example, that vulnerable groups are currently eating chitedze in Machinga. We can interpret that in English. Pardon? Yes. So the Commission has further noted that the realization of the right to adequate food is both an achievable goal under the SDGs and the way ahead for transformational change. The right to food cannot be realized with persistent hunger, ladies and gentlemen, food insecurity and malnutrition. And in order to protect it and respect it, we need to make sure there is an enabling environment that must provide us with better policy design, increased pro-poor and pro-vulnerable investments, improved governance, and evidence-based support and assessments. It's in this regard where I commend the coalitions, CISANET and others for the evidence-based support, but also for the increased dialogues and also research that is being done in this area. As per our mandate, the Commission engages with the government on the recommendations, and it has always made comments on the food situation in the country. However, as expected, little improvement is being registered in terms of compliance levels, and this is a concern for the Commission. However, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that this commemoration and this dialogue today will strengthen Malawi's trajectory towards its full progressive realization of the right to food, in which the application of the provisions of the voluntary guidelines on the right to food will play a significant role. Let me finish off with a sobering quote by Jacques Diouf, who said, "Hunger is not an issue of charity, it is an issue of justice." I believe we must do our part to ensure that we make the right to food a reality for Malawians. I wish us a fruitful discussion on the rights-based programming for food and nutrition and security discussions today. Thank you very much for your attention.
Many thanks indeed, Executive Secretary, Malawi Human Rights Commission, for such a powerful speech. I think she deserves another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. A speech that has cut across so many areas that will be reflecting on, I think, today. And I believe that as we'll be now diving deep into our agenda, probably be having our next panel. Our panelists will also have, I think, some issues which can easily be connected to some of the things that have come up from the keynote speech by the Executive Secretary, Malawi Human Rights Commission. Akambaza mbiri zina zamveka mwachidule akungolunjika ponena kuti be ngati dziko zikuonetsa kuti pali zambiri zotikhoza kuchita kuti nkhani imene ya chakudya komanso kadyedwe kabwino tiyikonze, ndipo akutsimikizanso kuti ulendo ukadalipo ndipo ndi wautali. Pafunika tipitize kuonetsetsa kuti tikuwazindikiritsabe anthu, pafunikanso kuti adindo osiyanasiyana azitengapo gawo, chifukwa nkhani ndi yaikulu kwambiri komanso ndiyofunikira, ndipo ali ndi chiyembekezo zonena kuti tipitizabe kukambirana. Ana akambapo za mu newspaper kuti alembanso nkhani ngati zomwezi, kuti biro imene wena kuti izithandizira pa nkhani ngati zimene zatha zaka 21 lamulo limene kuti likafike ku parliament alikambirane sili kusuntha ilangokhala anthu angoponyezana afuseni aku agriculture, afuseni aku nduna za umoyo. So akunena kuti izi nzodandaulitsa maka tikaona imene lili dziko lathu kuti sili kuthana ndi nkhani imene ya njala, anthu ena kuvutikabe kusowa zakudya ndi zina zotero. Atsimikiza kuti ngati commission akhala kuyankhula ndi boma pa nkhani imeneyi ya chakudya kuno ku Malawi, komabe zimuonetsa kuti pena akapereka malingaliro awo mwina samatha kugwiritsidwa ntchito mokwanira, zimene akupona kuti tonse tikozogwirana manja kuti popita chitsogolo tithe kuonetsetsa kuti chilungamo pa nkhani imene kuchitika. Chifukwa nkhani ya zakudya si nkhani yachibwana, si nkhani yoseweretsa, ndi nkhani yakuzana ufulu wathu, umoyo wathu, komanso kuti tonse tikhale ndi moyo ndi kuthandizira kupititsa chitukuko cha dziko patsogolo. Nati tipemphenso kuti taombere manja chifukwa chakuyankhula kumeneyo. With that, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to have our first panel, and I shall be calling in front our panelists, starting with Mr. Doshan Kotokera, Minister of Agriculture, or maybe there is a change. I see, okay, fine. We'll get more details, but we'll have a representative from Minister of Agriculture. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Let me also call in front Justice Redson Kapindu to come forward, please. Thank you very much. A round of applause for him as well. Fowl, they are not here today. Okay, thank you so much indeed. So we'll have Bwana Redson Kapindu, but also we'll have Minister of Agriculture with us. Let me also call a representative from the Department of Nutrition to come forward. DHNA, please, if you are within. All right. Let's also give a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you one more time. And let me appreciate our panelists this morning for joining us. And this panel basically will be focusing on policy instruments. What is it that we have at the moment? How is it speaking to the topic that we are discussing today? And perhaps what else can we do as a nation, as a society, to improve in some of the key areas? Remember, we are talking about promoting human rights-based programming and financing for food and nutrition security in Malawi, as we are also celebrating 20 years of these UN voluntary guidelines on the right to food, assessing progress, looking at the challenges, but also trying to reconfigure our future. So at this point in time, I would like to first of all request the Ministry of Agriculture to give us an overview in terms of the policy instruments that we have at the moment, but also some efforts that have been done so far. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm Chimwemwe Koswe from Ministry of Agriculture. In terms of the policy instruments that we have, I would say that at the national level, we have the Malawi 2063, which is the overarching development vision. And this is being operationalized in 10 years phases, with the beginning with the first Malawi 2063 implementation plan, MIP1. And in the MIP1, it identifies agriculture productivity and commercialization as a pillar. And the agriculture productivity and commercialization, it has the focus areas, including agriculture diversification, irrigation development, anchor farms, agriculture inputs. Then at the sectoral level, we have the National Agriculture Policy, which is the overarching policy in the agriculture sector. In terms of operationalizing the right to food, we, as a nation, we have the Malawi Vulnerability Assessment Committee. The Malawi Vulnerability Assessment Committee does assess the food situation in the country, and based on the assessments that are done by the Malawi Vulnerability Assessment Committee, the population is classified into two: those that have the economic ability to purchase food, and those that do not have the economic ability to purchase food. So, for those that do not have the economic ability to purchase food, we have the humanitarian assistance that is operationalized through the Strategic Grain Reserve and the SGR committee. And then for those that have the ability to purchase, we use the Agriculture Development and Marketing Corporation, where they open the markets where they can afford. So in terms of the instruments, in terms of monitoring the food security situation, we have the agriculture production estimates. This gives us how much we have produced, and then probably assess if it's adequate or not. Then we also have the food balance sheet, which tells us if we have adequate food in the country, and possibly where we don't have adequate food, if we need to import to supplement our food that we need. Then we also have the market price, or we kind of monitor market price trends, and this helps us to determine which markets we should prioritize in terms of allocating the maize from the ADMAC perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that background information. And now we go to the department. Catherine Tsoka, you talk about health, you talk about nutrition every day. Would you want to supplement on what Minister of Agriculture has already highlighted? Thank you. Over to you.
Yes. As Minister of Agriculture has highlighted, I think he pointed out a number of national food and nutrition instruments that are available. But I'll focus on the nutrition. Yeah, so at national level, we have the the National Multi-Sector Nutrition Policy, which is a policy that encompasses nutrition programs that focuses on a number of areas from all the stakeholders. And the National Nutrition Policy has also the supporting strategies and guidelines that operationalize now the policy. So we have the micronutrient strategy, the maternal, infant and young child nutrition strategy, the school health and nutrition, and the adolescent nutrition. So the National Multi-Sector Nutrition Policy takes into account all the sectors that are involved in implementation of the policy. And in terms of now assessing the nutrition situation, that usually it occurs maybe through every few years, not every year, but at times we do carry out nutrition assessment at national level through the SMART surveys that are done regularly, but at times maybe not every year. But it takes into account the nutrition situation during rainy season, but also after harvest. And now the DHS is the one that we depend on in terms of assessing the situation at the overall nutrition situation at national level. But that also happens every 5 years, but for the past, I think the last DHS was done in 2016, 15-16, so it's almost 9 years now in terms of now looking at nutrition situation. But we also have other surveys like the multiple indicator cluster survey, which also is like a mid-term review of the DHS. And this one took place recently in 2019. That is the recent survey that was conducted. So in terms of policy instruments, I think we have a number of policies and strategies to be able to realize the right to food. Yes, maybe let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. It's quite interesting to also hear from you. We'll be coming up again to you, maybe on follow-up questions. But allow me at this point in time to also offer the floor to Honorable Justice Redson Kapindu to briefly speak to us about the bill which you've been talking about. You were involved in the drafting of this bill. How does what we are discussing today resonate so well, what is contained in the draft bill? And as we are celebrating 20 years of these UN voluntary guidelines on the right to food, why is it so necessary that we make progress as a country? Let me give you the floor now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, moderator. And I thank the organizers for inviting me. Where do I start? There are a number of pieces of legislation in this country which deal with matters relating to food in different ways. So we have, for example, the Malawi Bureau of Standards Act. Okay, the Malawi Bureau of Standards Act is a regulatory piece of legislation through which the Malawi Bureau of Standards makes sure that the food that is being consumed in this country meets appropriate standards, and they have also a comprehensive set of guidelines to that effect. We have other pieces of legislation. Milk and Milk Products Act regulates how milk is to be treated. Meat and Meat Products Act, how we should handle meat. Public Health Act deals with certain aspects relating to how we should deal with food
with regard to health matters and so on. Now, what was observed, I think, was that if you refer to the voluntary guidelines of 2004, that among other things, those guidelines say that governments must make sure that they adopt comprehensive pieces of legislation that guarantee food as a right. Malawi, was party to that, as you rightly said, as I heard in the opening remarks, and we are also a party to the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Article 11 of that covenant addresses matters relating to food and nutrition. The Convention on the Rights of the Child, a child-specific piece of a treaty, deals with these matters. So we have obligations at the international level. We have obligations even on a regional setting under the African human rights system relating to food and nutrition. So there is an imperative that the country must come up with a comprehensive piece of legislation that does not only regulate, because the pieces of legislation that I talked about, I think I forgot to mention, that if you look at all of them, the control is on, the focus is on control and regulation. They are not looking at food from a rights perspective to say that the people have a right, they are entitled to a right, the government has an obligation to protect, to promote, to fulfill the right to adequate food and nutrition. They don't address things from that perspective. It is from a perspective of controlling and regulating how these products are to be dealt with, the food products. We don't have a legislation
I'll just
that deals
interrupt
with
you a
this
little
issue.
bit.
So
What if, for example,
yes,
the government will come in and say, we are already doing that, okay? They will, for example, say, look, we have got programs that are helping us to feed, for example, our learners in schools. Look, we are trying to facilitate a couple of AIP as an example, as an initiative to make sure that the people have got adequate food. In terms of affordability of the food, they also tell you, no, we have got other initiatives. For example, they'll talk about the MIC, they'll talk about the AGCOM, some of the initiatives which they are already facilitating some of the things that you're talking about. How would you respond to those kind of sentiments? I'm not saying they're saying that, they're here, they will talk, but I just want us to put into context what you're discussing today.
Yeah, in fact, I was coming to that. And then these are important initiatives, obviously, right? They are important initiatives, important measures in the context of the realization of the right to adequate food and nutrition. They are. But I'm sure those people that are saying those things are not saying that from a rights perspective in the sense that they have a legal obligation to do it. They are proceeding from a policy perspective. And the policies that we talked about here. Now, policies are discretionary instruments. And the authorities are going to tell you that, oh, well, I think our priorities maybe have changed, right? If you have legal guarantees, it is not just a matter of policy discretion. It is a matter of legal obligation for you to do it. You have a legal obligation to do it. And in addition to that, you have an enforceable mechanism of redress, okay, which you will not find in all these policy initiatives. AIP, so if someone is aggrieved, is there a scheme under that scheme where someone would say that I want to enforce this obligation on the part of the state? You will not find that, and you therefore need, an instrument which is going to empower the vulnerable, the marginalized, and so on, so that if they need redress, the state and other actors, it's not just the state, non-state actors also have their own obligations, right? The rights holders must hold the duty bearers to account legally by reference to enforceable legal obligations. And that, when you look at the bill, is something that the deal comprehensively addresses, at least from my perspective. It is sad that to date, the bill is in the state that it is in. I wish we could have been much further ahead by now.
So, why do you think we are where we are today? Why is it that authorities are jittery with some of the provisions that are in the bill? What would be your own assessment?
I would
21 years is just too long.
Oh, well, too long, but look, I don't have the answers. I mean, the politicians probably have the answers. I don't, so I don't want to start speculating why they are dragging feet, because I am not party to those conversations. I don't know what they are discussing, so I don't want to speculate and start saying, I think it is because of this. But I would only say from a rights perspective, and as a citizen, that to me, it is unfortunate that we have had this long delay. Food is critical, to the life of the nation. And this is something that should have been prioritized, on top of everything else. But, I don't know the collective wisdom that applies elsewhere. And I don't want to, to be...
To interfere with that collective wisdom.
I know they would probably have good reasons. And when you ask them, they can explain themselves.
Yes.
But from my perspective, it is unfortunate.
Minister of Agriculture, do you want to speak to this topic? Why has it taken us so long to move forward with this bill? But also, I want you to reflect on the journey 20 years down the line, having these guidelines in place. Are we doing so much in domesticating these guidelines? Thank you.
In terms of domesticating guidelines, as I already alluded to earlier on, we have the Malawi Vulnerability Assessment Committee. The formation of the Malawi Vulnerability Assessment Committee is the realization that food is a right, and therefore it assesses those that are missing their food entitlements. And we have the Strategic Grain Reserve Assessment, Strategic Grain Reserve Committee, that helps us to assess the extent of the individuals that are missing their food entitlements, and accordingly we respond to it through the strategic grain reserve. I think that's what I could say in as far as our interventions are concerned. However, there are issues that we have observed that kind of affect us in terms of attaining the right food. For example, the issue of preferences. In the case of Malawi, when we're talking about food, is maize. However, when we get our food balance sheet, in terms of converting the different types of food that we have into maize equivalent, it does show that maybe as a nation we are food secure. However, because of our preferences in terms of food, we tend to have those cases where we have food insecurity. There are issues to do with the, I would say, resilience building. Our production systems are vulnerable to climatic shocks. And this, in a way, has somehow negatively impacted on our food production system. But from the government side, we have tried to build resilience through one, generating, I would say, varieties, or crop varieties that are adaptive to climate change, the building of or the development of irrigation schemes, or indeed increasing area under irrigation. However, though I would say that we haven't reached the desired level, I would say that at least some strides are being made. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm still trying to hear something from you in terms of what has been your role in making sure that this bill is passed and we are done with this topic. Is it something that you're also interested in?
I would say it's something that we'd be interested in, but it does not directly fall under our ministry.
Sure, that much I'm aware of. But I'm simply asking, what has been your role? Is there anything that you've been doing? I'm asking this because we are talking about breaking institutional boundaries. We need to coordinate very well, work together. If you're an interested party, is there anything else that you've been doing on this one?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to come in? Yeah, please, Catherine.
Yeah, I think as a department, we are also concerned that the passing of the Food and Nutrition Bill was delayed. I think there was a lot of momentum in 2018, and we thought maybe it would go to Parliament, but that didn't happen. And now, we don't know now what's the direction. Yeah, indeed, as public actors, there are we have provided the enabling environment for the realization of right to food. We have a number of interventions that have been highlighted in our policy, and the right to food is one of the key principles within the policy, and there are a number of interventions that have been highlighted to ensure that the communities have access to a diversified diet. But then, as my colleague from Ministry of Agriculture has indicated, that in Malawi we focus so much on maize, but on the nutrition side, I think we say maize, chakuja sichimanga choka. Maize is not the only food that we can get from the staples, because there are a number of foods that are within the staple group. But then when we talk about food security, I think as a country we focus on maize. So it could be, as he has indicated, that is food preference, but it could be also maybe politically pushed, that we focus so much on food. I may be wrong, but maybe some might also have something to say in that regard. But I feel that we can do more to ensure that we achieve the right to food by making sure that the communities have the means to produce the diversified foods. And in terms of the Department of Nutrition, of course I was not involved as a person, but I know that the department played also a big role in pushing the food and nutrition bill so that it goes to Parliament. And there were a number of engagements even with the parliamentary committee, so that they also play a role. But since we don't have, I don't know whether we have the representation from the political side.
I wouldn't think so.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think so.
Maybe this dialogue would also have made more sense if they were present as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for explaining on all those issues, but also clarifying that maybe our focus has indeed been on like maize for quite some time, but there is also so much that we can do. On a lighter note, people have been discussing the Chitete issue from a negative point of view. And then I saw someone, is it Stacia, posted something that is from a different opinion, to say Chitete may not be all that bad, because to an extent you can also consider it as food, as long as you check the nutrition content. I don't know, what is your take on this one? Because we could be demonizing what should be our indigenous and local foods that maybe shouldn't be an issue at all.
Yeah, I don't know what the nutrient contents of chiteze are, but when you look at food security, we also consider the foods that people frequently eat. If they eat only when they don't have the usual foods that they eat, then we see that there is a problem. Yeah, it could be that chiteze could be not as bad as we think it is in terms of the nutrient content, but it's not the usual food that people eat in that community. And that should give us a sign that there is something wrong. And as actors, we need to do something, because that is an indication that there is acute food insecurity in that area, and we need to do something.
Thank you so much. Let me now go back to Bwana Kapindu before I open up to the colleagues here, maybe to ask a question or two. In absence of this maybe piece of legislation, what else are we missing as a country? And what are some of the key provisions which you think, I think would be very important in making sure that we begin to discuss these issues from a different point of view? Thank you.
Well, maybe let me begin by commenting on the Chiteze subject.
Yes, please.
And to say, you know, when you are looking at the content of the right to food, if you look at I think it is general comment number 12 of the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, so the comment on and elaborate on the content of the right. So there are elements there, okay? Availability, accessibility, affordability, cultural acceptability, right? On the last one, if food is not culturally acceptable, you cannot then be saying that, we are guaranteeing the right when the food that is available is actually food that is not culturally acceptable, and maybe people are just having the food as a desperate measure. Then the state is failing in its obligation to make sure that the people enjoy that right. I mean, I just wanted to
very
comment
important,
on that.
very important.
To say,
yeah.
It is not just about. I mean, for example, examples are given that you go in a Muslim community where people have no food, and you say, "Oh, we have brought food. Here is pork." You basically are insulting those people, even though what you are saying you are making available to them is food to some people, right? So those, I think, are things that we need to be looking at. Now, I think your question was to say, in the absence of this comprehensive law, you were saying, what are we missing?
Exactly. Why should we treat it as an agent issue? Why should authorities? I mean,
the reason, as I said, that why it should be taken as an agent issue is that when you have a piece of legislation like that, for me, one of the most important purposes of the piece of legislation is so that people can hold duty bearers to account. Now, the Constitution does not have an express guarantee on the right to food. Right? We can creatively interpret it and to say maybe it can be read into the right to life, maybe it can be read into the right to development, but it doesn't have an express guarantee.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's already a difficulty for someone who wants to enforce a right to access a remedy. So it is crucial that if I believe we do as a country, right, we want our people to have easy access to remedies, and in this area of food is a life issue, right? People should have access to remedies. That's one. Two, the right is not just, of course, guaranteeing people access to remedies, but the bill is delineating clear obligations on the part of the state, what they have to do, including this issue of diversification that we are talking about. I think it was probably section 8 of the bill, if my memory is not betraying me, which addresses comprehensively these issues of mechanization and so on, diversification in terms of crop diversification, nutrition diversification. All these issues are captured there in a consolidated piece of bill. And I think for policymakers, for executive implementers, that would also help them to have, an easy one source book, if you will, which is to be a guiding instrument for them in their daily execution of duties. So I think there are many reasons that can be given for the. And I think it shouldn't really be a serious debate. I think we will all agree that we want the right to food, and those who are delaying, I'm sure if we engage them, they are not going to say we are not interested. I can say a little bit.
You think they have
2018 that she referred to?
Yes, yeah.
Right?
Yes.
I had information. Now I don't want to say much.
Okay.
in a setting like this, but
yes,
I had information that the bill went to at least the cabinet committee responsible, and they deliberated on it, and they sent it back to the department. Maybe the department can say what cabinet said,
what happened, yes,
at that point. But they looked at it, so they didn't say we are not interested in matters of food, but they had interesting comments which they made. But I think they shouldn't be coming from me. So the people agree, but I think people are worried about being held to account. That's what I got. I think if I am to summarize the comments that came, people were afraid of being held to account, which is the very reason we actually have legislation. So, as you said, I don't know who said it, if we had some of them here, maybe they could have explained better. Yeah.
All right. Many thanks indeed. Let me open up briefly to colleagues in the audience. I'll get very limited questions because of time constraints, but in case you've got a burning issue, then we'd like to give you a chance, straight to the point, less than 30 seconds, then we can try to address that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry that I have got a private sector look at these issues, and I'm also on the production side. The way we look at this right to food issues, I think there are 4 key issues. Whilst we are concentrating a lot on the policy, but I think practically on the ground there are 4 issues that we need to be considering seriously. And that's availability of the food, accessibility of the food, adequacy of the food, and sustainability issues. So for example, I keep German Shepherds. I had 6 of them. This year I've lost 4 of them. I only remain with 2. They all died because of aflatoxin. So the maize that we're eating this year has got a lot of aflatoxin. What does it mean to humans? So there are also issues of food safety, which we need to be considering seriously. However, I look at it that for this dialogue to make sense, there has to be some kind of a business approach to it. One of the biggest problems that we have.
You have 1 minute is over,
Yes,
so I'll give you
yes.
30 seconds
It's
extra.
unfortunate
Thank
that
you.
you call people to these meetings, then you don't have time for them. It's very, very unfortunate.
You have time. We do have to manage the time so that
Number
you
one
can be able
is
to
production.
balance it.
The Right to Food Coalition has to make sure that adequate food is being produced before the people have got the right to access it. The second one is the supply chains. The supply chain is okay because already in Malawi we are losing about 45% of all the food that we lose through post-harvest losses. So already we produce enough food, but we are losing a lot of it. This dialogue needs to address that. Then there's the issue of processing, fortifying, making sure that you've got enough vitamins in it. I think the nutritionists should know that. The processing, the value addition is very key. Lastly is the marketing side. That's the food being available at the right place, at the right time, at the right place, with a fair price. Because at the end of the day, you've got the vendors and everybody else who are distorting the market and the food is inaccessible. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Anyone else with an intervention before we can wind up here with our panelists? It looks like we are okay and good to go. Many thanks indeed, all of you. Now, those are really very critical issues that you have raised, and I'm quite sure we have been discussing these issues now and again, including during most of the food systems dialogues that we have had, and it is important that we seriously reflect on this and then begin to make progress. I see there is another hand. Yes, over to you, sir.
Thank you. My observation is going to the Ministry of Agriculture. You actually indicated that your approach to the right to food, it's like through MVAC, apart from the other safety nets, in which you indicated that those who have got money, you are actually providing them through ADMAC, and those who don't have money through the strategic grain reserves. And again, looking at this issue, in relation to right to food. Right now, in some ADMAC markets, there is no food. And again, when we are talking about the safety nets, say affordable input program, it is always marred by irregularities. And again, even the strategic grain reserve through the lean season response, again, there is a lot of irregularities. Now, how can you address this in relation to right to food? The second is on the enactment of legal frameworks. Yes, we have got the NAPA, National Adaptation Programs of Action, we have got the National Agriculture Policy, and recently we have got the NRS, the National Resilience Strategy. Looking at all these frameworks, currently they are not actually talking to each other, and they are not covering all important aspects in as far as the right to food is concerned. What's your take? And now we are looking at this having 21 years of food and nutrition bill,
Sure.
maybe gathering dust somewhere. Yet we have got these registrations that are not talking to each other. What's the way forward on this? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let me start with Minister of Agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of the right to food, indeed, I indicated that our approach is in terms of those instruments that you have mentioned. However, on the ADMAC, I think there is something that is being done at the moment because the Honorable Minister directed us to work on it. So there is something that the Minister is currently doing. Also on the AIP. On the legal frameworks that you have talked about, the National Resilience Strategy. And
what is that something that you're doing? It's not public information yet, or what is that something that you're doing, or you're working on?
It's not yet public information, but we have been instructed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not to provide food to the people, or?
No, to provide food.
Okay.
To address the issues of entitlements to food, food entitlements.
Okay.
Yeah, in terms of opening the markets. And I think maybe you also heard in the one of the rallies, the head of state was there mentioning that we need to open up the ADMAC markets. So something is happening on that perspective. On the legal frameworks, just to correct you, the National Resilience Strategy and the National Agriculture Policy are not legal frameworks, rather policy frameworks. So, in terms of consistency, I think they are talking about different issues. However, there are elements of them trying to drive at the same thing. For example, in the National Agriculture Policy, the 2016 one, there was a pillar on resilience issues. So, in a way, it is speaking to the National Resilience Strategy. Thank you.
All right, so maybe as a way of winding up also, Minister of Agriculture, what's going to be the way forward from now, having discussed what they have discussed of Chisogology and Jordan, to make sure that you are institutionalizing this issue of right to food, not just food, but adequate food, safe food, nutritious food, that is also affordable for all Malawians.
Thank you.
As a way of also renewing your commitment, if you're interested in doing that.
Yeah, okay. I think going forward, we have heard what you have said, but let me also state at the moment that we have a policy in the offing, the National Agriculture Policy. This one somehow has a priority area on food and nutrition security. So we hope that once it's launched, we'll be doing things differently and maybe
somehow, or we are double sure we have it, and it's also speaking to the right to food issue, because this somehow thing is the same thing that we are struggling with.
The issue why I'm saying somehow is because to all these policies, it's not only the ministry, we have different stakeholders. So there are cases where maybe one stakeholder is pulling in the right direction, the other one is pulling in the different direction. That's why I'm saying somehow. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you so much indeed. Bwana Kapindu, how do we close? How do we move forward? Thank you. As you're also reflecting on some of the issues that were raised, of course, by our colleagues, yes.
Yeah, look, I wasn't entirely sure whether any of the comments were directed to me, but I would just say a few words about our colleague from the private sector who raised a number of issues in terms of how he would suggest that we proceed. And I think I agree with almost everything that he said. Maybe I should even remove the almost. I agree with what he said. But just to also say to him and like-minded people that almost everything that he was raising is addressed in the bill. So for example, the bill may not necessarily directly mention post-harvest losses, but if you go to, as I said, the section that elaborately discusses the measures, including promotional measures, educational measures that the state machinery must take to sensitize our people, most of these issues are addressed. He talked about fortification. I think chapter 6, the entire chapter 6 of the bill is addressing matters of fortification of food and emphasizing on the importance of those issues. He talked about issues of pricing and how vendors distort markets, and again the issue of market regulation is also addressed in there. So I mean, it just probably emphasizes the importance to me of having that piece of legislation urgently attended to. How do we move forward? I would say those who have the responsibility of lobbying and advocating to the people in the relevant duty bearers must gear up and continue talking about this and emphasizing the need for Parliament to pass that law. Obviously, some of us are not involved in those. We sit down and observe.
Yeah, but let me also seek your opinion.
I would encourage
those involved before you hand over the mic. We're talking about climate change. Climate change, extreme weather events. Almost each and every year we are hit either by floods or drought or something else, which is making it difficult for all of us to break this food insecurity cycle. And maybe that's what is making our politicians afraid to say, okay, it looks like we're not going to make it. How is this bill trying to cover them, but also this topic? And secondly, you have talked about the issue of pricing, markets, and all these other things. We have had issues with the private sector complaining that sometimes the way government or Minister of Agriculture, Trade, and others manage themselves really puts them in a very difficult situation to make really long-term investment decisions, because the environment does change any time depending on what the leadership at that particular time thinks. Is this bill also in a way trying to address those issues? Thank you.
The last question again, I think I'm not entirely sure what you're saying.
Okay, so earlier on you had indicated that it looks like, in summary, some people are not comfortable. They don't want to be held accountable on some of the things. It seems, yes, exactly. And now I was trying to bring in the issue of climate change, which has exacerbated issues of food insecurity.
Yes.
And I think we'll still have this problem for quite some time. And to them, it may mean that we'll keep on struggling with the issue of hunger for quite some time. And there are certain obligations which they need to take to make sure this issue is sorted. So my thinking is, should we think that maybe these people are somehow not comfortable to commit themselves to some of these things because of the climate change issue we're talking about as a problem? And secondly, we're looking at the private sector failing to make long-term investment decisions because of the unpredictable environment within which they operate, because the rules can change any time and they have no backup or something that can shield them. So does this bill somehow also protect the private sector to make sure that as a country we are making straightforward decisions that will not change any time and then cause problems to the private sector?
Well, maybe starting with the last one.
Yes.
Look, it's been a while since I read that.
Okay.
But from my memory, I don't think it has provisions that addresses directly the issue of protecting the private sector from the unpredictability of, authorities in government. No, that is I don't think it is addressed.
Okay,
I don't think it is addressed, and I am not entirely sure whether it would be the right piece of legislation to deal with that specific issue. Then you said the issue of climate change and the climate shocks, whether that is perhaps one of the reasons or a major reason why those who are duty bearers might be reticent to embrace this, thinking that they will be bothered by rights holders, isn't it? Well, it is unfortunate if that is what they would be thinking, because yes, these environmental disasters might be with us for a while, but this is exactly why people are in the responsibility, in the positions that they are, to plan, to strategize, and to address those issues. If you are saying these climate shocks will be with us for a while, right? And then your answer is, therefore hunger is going to be with us for a long time. I have a problem with an authority who reasons like that. Then let's probably someone who will say, no, we know that we have these environmental shocks, but this is our plan to deal with it so that our people are not hungry. I mean, this is what I would expect a duty bearer to do, rather than a duty bearer to say, oh no, we should run away from responsibility because we know hunger will be with us for a long time. I don't think anyone in this room would be comfortable having people in authority who reason like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We do really appreciate. Catherine, how do you close?
Yes, I think I also want to agree with the sentiments expressed by the private sector, that indeed there are a number of areas that we need to address when we talk about food security. And as you've rightly indicated, all those areas are highlighted in our policy. And we've also incorporated issues to do with food systems, and as well as the climate change, linking nutrition and climate change. And the issue of food safety, I think that has also been highlighted. It was there in the last policy, but now I think we have now highlighted what are the actions that we need to take as actors. So I think with the financial resources, I think there's a lot that we can do to improve food and nutrition security. And there are also issues to do with fortification and biofortification that are also promoted in the policy, as well as food processing, promoting food processing and preservation. We are not only focusing on the household, because that's where previously we were focusing on, because that's where we know they are the vulnerable people, the people that need the food. But we also look into the small scale food processors that we also need to reach them in terms to talk about issues to do with food safety. And also making sure that we reduce food losses after harvest. Yeah, thank you so much.
And moving forward, how are you geared to make sure that we have renewed commitment, including with you stakeholders that you're working with, so that we can make this right to food a reality here in Malawi?
Yeah, I think it's not only where we only have policies, but then how can we make those policies, the actions that are highlighted in the policies, how can we put them into actions? The good thing with nutrition is that we have well-coordinated structures, governance structures, where we can engage all the key actors that are involved in advancing the right to food.
But that has not been happening. That is our concern, and I think that's why
I don't think it has not been happening.
Or to what extent has it been happening? Are we okay?
Yeah.
Are we comfortable? Or do you want to do more?
Maybe not to the extent that we want, because maybe there are some key actors that were left out. And also recently, I think we have also improved the private and public partnership. We have the Sun Business Network, which I think recently it has been silent, and we need to re-engage them so that we are more active, and then even reaching out to all those networks that are available. And recently we launched the Scaling Up Nutrition 3.0, where we also engage key actors, including the local leaders. But I think we need to do more in terms of engaging all these key actors so that whatever has been highlighted in the policy is put into action. But it's not like we are not doing anything. No, I think that I would dispute to say, no, we are doing something. And actually, I think there's a lot that we have done as nutrition. And there are a lot of course, also in terms of investment, I think a number of partners have come in to support. Only that maybe our focus has been so much on the infant and young child feeding, maybe not a lot on the other part. The things that we are talking about, food safety, the food processing, I think there hasn't been a lot of investment in that area. Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed, Catherine, and let me also thank all our panelists for their contributions, for their insights, but also for the updates which they have shared with us. It is coming out very clear that in terms of the policy instruments, we have some in place, but they are not adequately addressing the right to food topic which we have at hand. And it has also come out very clear that we need to fast track the passing of this bill, and perhaps we need also to come out clear in terms of who is going to push that agenda from now onwards, so that we can make this a reality for all of us. It also appears there is still need for continued stakeholder engagement, so that we are aligned in our efforts, and we should really refrain from working in silos. So I would like to request all of you to join me in giving our panelists a huge round of applause as we wind up our panel this morning. Many thanks indeed for being with us this morning. Wishing you all the best. We're going to have a very short break. We'll reconvene after 15 minutes, but for now, we may all go outside for a group photo, and then we are going to enjoy our refreshments. See you again after 15 minutes. Thank you all. also not forgetting colleagues that have been implementing a couple of initiatives on the ground. It's also good to hear from their stories. Remember, one of the objectives of this dialogue is also to learn from each other. We want to exchange. We want to appreciate what else is happening, in what way, and also how best can we improve what we're doing. Tima ngonena kuti amabungo mwese aboma akonzeka kuti afuna atipatsire maganizo awo komanso malingaliro awo ndi nzeru zawo pa nkhani imene yokhudzana ndi ufulu wa chakudya komanso kadyedwe kabwino. So tukamba za food security but also nkhani ya nutrition, food and nutrition security zonse pamodzi kuti tingatani ngati dziko kuti zinthu zitiyendere bwino. Chiwerengero cha anthu amene akunyencherabe chikhala ngati chikanalipobe kwathu kuno, tikuchitapo kanthu monga anafotokozera Catherine, suti tinganene kuti palibe chimene tikuchita ayi, komabe nkutheka kuti pali zopetchera zina ndi zina zimene zikutibweza mbuyo, ndipo mpofunika kuti tichite bwino koposera mmene tikuchitira pakadali pano. So pompano nditana nzanga fundi Kayamba Phiri amene atithandizire kuchita zokambirana zotsatirazi, ndipo akabwera yeyo kuchita zimenezo 40 minutes tikhalenso tikumva ngati kasamale chabe ka nkhani zikuluzikulu zimene zatuluka pakadali pano tisanapite ku lunch, kuti tikachoka ku lunchiko tidzakhanso tuchita zokambirana zomaliza zokhudzana atsogoleri athu mafumu ndi ena otero, kenako tipita m'magulu kuti tikakhale ngati tikumangirira zonse kuti kodi kupita chitsogolo tingachite bwanji tonse. So any moment from now, let me invite Fundi to come forward and then take over the podium and engage our civil society leaders, policy researchers, as well as implementers to hear from them as to what else are they doing. A round of applause for her, please, ladies and gentlemen.
Checking my time to check if it's still morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So we are going to have our second panel discussion this morning, which focuses on the civil society and policy research and the contributions that have been made towards implementation of the Right to Food programs here in Malawi. We will have 3 panelists, a representative from CISANET, Julius Ngoma, who is the national director, right? We also have Andrew Jamali, who's representing the National Planning Commission. And Andrew Jamali is the research manager at NPC. He will be joining us virtually. And then last but not least, we have Alfred Gambui, representing the Right to Food Coalition, as well as the Center for Environmental Policy and Advocacy, CEPA. Are we set? Okay. All right. Just one.
Just one?
Nice.
I think we only have 2. So what again? Use this one.
Yeah.
Dr. AJ.
All right, so while we're waiting to finalize
engaging our online panelists, we can get started. So we have questions for our panelists here. As mentioned, my immediate right, we have Julius Ngoma representing CISANET. And Julius is the National Director for CISANET. And we also have Alfred Gambui, who is SEPA's Head of Programs, but as well as the Right to Food Coalition's Chairperson. So I'd like to start with you, Julius. If you could share a bit about your experience in coordinating stakeholders' interventions on climate change or climate-related work in relation to food systems transformation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and good morning, everyone. Indeed, I'm honored to be part of this important dialogue and being part of this conversation around food and food systems, particularly also issues to do with food and nutrition. I think we have had, being a country that is heavily reliant upon agriculture, and both economy-wise at national level and even within the communities, I think there's a lot to think about, because this sector is heavily impacted by climate change. It's a climate-sensitive, sector, so to say, and that has, made it a point that we've seen over the last couple of years. More and more stakeholders, more and more NGOs, more and more civil society organizations coming into the sector to do one or two interventions. Could be interventions that are related to adaptation, climate change adaptation, climate change mitigation, and more recently we've been talking about the issues of loss and damage. All of these are actually interventions that we cannot ignore, and most of these interventions are also done in the agriculture sector, trying to also, save our situation of food and the agricultural situation in the country. So that already tells you a story, the influx of, interventions, plus the organizations that are coming in to do some work related to climate change and linking it to agriculture and food systems, I think has been growing, and that has also made our network that coming from the civil society network on climate change to be also expanding over the years, and creating more and more challenges on how to streamline the work of the civil society and NGOs, particularly how they can be supported to intervene in the work of climate change adaptation, mitigation, and loss and damage. And that has not been an easy thing, because each and every player who is coming in still needs to understand the fundamentals of climate change, the basics of what climate change is, so that we support them to design interventions that are climate related, because it could be a buzzword, climate change, but you still also want to stakeholders to design climate related interventions that will make an impact on the ground, save our food and the agricultural situation on the ground. So we've actually moved into a situation where we also talking about having thematic working groups within the civil society, where one of the important working groups has been the adaptation, loss and damage, and agriculture. And this is where you find NGOs or civil society that are belonging to the network discussing more about how do we move ahead with agriculture-related interventions that are in line with climate change. And for example, what kind of, recommendations, what are we learning from the different interventions, or what kind of recommendations we need to put forward to the government and even to the international governments for, policies and legislative framework that needs to guide the way we want to do our climate smart agriculture, for example, and any other interventions that would help us to save the food and the agriculture situation from the impacts of climate change. So in a nutshell, this is what I can say for now. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Julius. Maybe just to get some clarification. So you've mentioned a couple of focus areas. So for example, the adaptation, mitigation, now most recently, loss and damage, but also supporting stakeholders in designing climate-sensitive programs. Could you also just speak to some of the limitations that have been there, that you've experienced in any of these focus areas in terms of enhancing food systems transformation?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think anyway, I think it still has some challenges. The growing interests could be from the civil society to actually play a role in the whole food and agricultural system. Some are actually driven by the situation at hand. Some are driven by the availability of maybe financial resources within the sector to come in, and that would also tell you different stories about how you want to manage things. For example, if you have institutions that would want to come because there's a funding arrangement within the climate space and you want to find yourself in the agriculture, you might get the funding, but you still need to have the understanding, the basic understanding of what climate change is. So we still deal with those kind of basic questions. What stakeholders not able to also understand clearly what climate change is. All these interventions are mentioning what it means to say adaptation, mitigation, loss and damage, and what kind of interventions needs to be designed so that we're able to address. So that's one of the things. The second thing is about financing that I talked about. So if you want to coordinate CSOs or any other stakeholders group, you still need to grapple with the issue of financing, because there are expectations around, why do I need to be part of this? For me to be relevant, I need to show that I'm doing something, and so on and so forth. So financing is not an easy thing to do. A few, stakeholders are able to get financing that can sustain the operation, can also even, finance the interventions that they are designing, but also coordination in general requires that kind of financing, so that to bring together stakeholders and have also policy dialogues and so on. It's not an easy thing. We also need to actually put more hands on the deck so that we are able to support everyone on the same. And coordination also requires the technical capabilities for the institutions that are doing the coordination work. So if that also, over the years, we still had to struggle on how best we want to organize ourselves, and also even have people and the human resources and other technical resources that should be there at the fore, so that we are able to support coordination work of the civil society to drive the agenda that we are talking about here, climate resilience, at the end of the day.
Thank you, Julius. So maybe just to go over to Alfred. So both as the Right to Food Coalition chairperson and as well as representing SEPA, what have been the challenges in lobbying for the bill, for the food and nutrition bill to be passed in Parliament here in Malawi?
Thank you, the moderator. It's nice also to be part of this great meeting here. Yeah, so on behalf of the civil society organizations that are advocating for the food and nutritional bill, we have several challenges. As you have seen that the bill has been there for over 20 years now, and the first challenge that we have had is the fact that we have had low political will towards the enactment of this bill, because as it has already been highlighted, there was a time that we are 100% sure that the bill would pass, but it actually failed to pass. Probably at that time, there was more tension between the civil society and government, because it was a time that we were changing governments. It was more or less like so close to an election year. So maybe also that contributed to what happened at that time. But all in all, the political will towards the enactment of this bill has been low. And that's one thing that we as advocates of the bill are basically fighting for. The other challenge is that there has also been a low level of awareness among the public in terms of what right to food is, because we still have people who think that right to food is right to be fed. And this low level of understanding is not only in the public, even at a higher level. So we still have those that still don't understand what right to food is. And as the advocates, it's also our responsibility and our duty that we create this our awareness at all these levels to make sure that we have a good understanding of what right to food is. The third challenge that we have had is that because the bill has taken too long, it has been very, very expensive to actually lobby for this bill, because it has stayed over 20 years. That represents 4 sets of parliamentarians. So some parliamentarians that we initially oriented to this, it did not come to the other set of parliament. So it means that we had to do the same thing to several layers of stakeholders. If the bill had to pass in time, we didn't have to waste much resources to repeat orientation to the same sets of stakeholders. Suffice to say that we also have some advocates who basically lost some hope into this and they dropped out. So even among ourselves as advocates, we still have to recruit more, because others, due to the time that the bill was taken, they began to lose hope in the fact that the advocacy for this could work. But we are not losing hope into this, and we are basically also trying to recruit more and more people to join this advocacy stream. In short, that's what I wanted to say.
Right. Thank you. Maybe just we've been talking about this since we started today, that it's been over 20 years. So maybe from the coalition's perspective, can you maybe just share if you think that if the bill were to be passed now, how relevant would it still be to the current issues that we're facing as a country in as far as transformative food systems is concerned?
Yeah, as a right to food platform, we still believe that the bill is still relevant to what is happening now, because as it was also highlighted in the other things that have already been spoken, there are some laws and regulations that hold some aspect of promoting issues of right to food. We talked about the MBS Act and other legislations as well. But if you look at this, they still have got some flaws. I would give an example to the MBS Act. If you see the fines that the MBS Act it has, they are a bit on the lower side. To the fact that some people, even those in the private sector, they can actually ably do away with compliance issues because they can pay for those bills. Yeah, so the food and nutritional bill, as it stands, it will be a supreme law in the food and nutritional sector. To the fact that when it becomes into law, it will actually enable these smaller regulations also to change. Like we have a Prisoners Act, which would also have to be revised when this it becomes a law. So there are these other smaller regulations that would have to revise to conform to what the bill is saying. And as such, it's actually very important and very essential that we make this bill into law. And to add on to that is the fact that as it stands now, it's difficult to basically hold duty bearers into account without this legislation, because this legislation is actually a commanding one in the food and nutritional sector. So it's easier to use this one as a way of holding all duty bearers who are in the food and nutritional sector. But also, this bill, if it becomes, it turns into a law, different players and different stakeholders will actually understand what their roles are in the implementation of the bill. So it will be easier to make things go on. Finally, I would actually also emphasize on the issues of compliance, because in this bill we have bigger fines on non-compliance on things like labeling and others. So because the fines in this bill are a bit high, those that would want to break such pieces of regulations would actually have to think twice. So in terms of compliance, we believe that there will be more compliance in terms of how we comply to the provisions of the law.
Thank you for that response. And maybe just last question for you from me would be, in any case, we have made strides in implementing food systems programs and with a focus on the right to food. In the absence of the bill, what have been some of the limitations in terms of implementing those programs?
Yeah, it is true that we have had some programs as in country, both by government and also by civil society organizations that we are doing to promote issues of right to food. But suffice to say that it is important that these programs that we are doing are also supported by a good legal framework, which in this case, the Food and Nutritional Bill, it's a good legal framework to support this. Because as at now you can as it stands now, the issues of right to food are not justiciable, but I think we need to make sure that justiciability is also there, and that would actually increase the compliance issues to the issues that leads to the right to food, and that would also increase the issues of accountability to those that are responsible to make sure that we are implementing programs and policies that supports issues of right to food. So in short, what we are saying is that besides all the programs that we have that supports issues of right to food, that is not a substitute to the need to basically have a legal framework that supports the justiciability of the right to food.
Thank you, Alfred. Are we ready to go? Okay. Yeah, so we, as mentioned before, that we have Andrew Jamali representing the National Planning Commission. He is joining us online. Welcome, Andrew. And Andrew is a research manager at NPC. So Andrew, we just wanted to understand from you what the national policy research priorities are or have been in as far as transformative food systems and the right to food is concerned. And also, what strides have we made in generating evidence that informs policies around food systems?
Thank you very much. Let me find out. Can you hear me audibly?
We can't hear you yet, so let's just sort out things here in the room.
Wait, you let me know when you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you now. You can proceed.
You can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great, fantastic. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you for giving us the opportunity to participate virtually. Regarding what the country is looking at in terms of the issues of transformative food systems and the focus on the right to food, you know that as a country, we already have Pillar 1 of Malawi 2063 as agriculture, productivity, and commercialization. What this pillar looks at is to make sure that the agriculture sector is performing optimally in the sense that it's providing food for the nation as well as the possibility of incomes through agriculture. Now, what that entails is, as a country, we are tuning ourselves to become self-reliant in terms of production of food. And that goes beyond the availability of food itself, but also looking at food as a right, in the sense that you'd look at Malawi fulfilling its budgetary requirements with regards to support to the agriculture sector. That shows that the government is committed to making sure that we are looking at food as a right. There are various programs that are in place to support higher productivity in the agriculture sector. And I must stress that the country is going through serious economic stress, but there are efforts that are actually being implemented amid those kind of challenges to make sure that we strike a proper balance in terms of food sufficiency for proper nutrition and diets. And that already tells you that as a country, we are tuning ourselves to fulfilling the right to the provision of food in the country. Programs that are in place include the massive irrigation programming with the Chile Valley Transformation, the Green Belt Authority, that are really providing spaces to augment productivity of food and cash crops. And we are also talking about the mega farms that have been put in place and actually being operationalized with various, footprints and handprints, emanating from the cooperatives, the private sector in terms of estate owners, big multinational companies that are supporting mega farm, initiatives. The idea is that Malawi should be able to feed itself. Now, this is a mammoth task because there are other pressing challenges. The population factor is key in that respect. The country is growing not in a rate commensurate to its food production, capacity. So those are challenges that we kind of encounter, but there are also fiscal slippages that have narrowed our resource base, so much so that our investment in the agriculture sector is not optimal as it is supposed to be. But as a country, we are not here to mourn and make noise about the challenges that we are facing. There are a lot of initiatives that the country is actually putting in place and really pushing through to make sure that we are augmenting our productivity levels in terms of food. And we also want to highlight that within the idea or the programming of food system transformation, there are issues to do with safety of foods and diets. There are issues to do with access to markets. There are issues to do with soil health. There are issues to do with inputs for agriculture. All those interventions are aimed at making sure that Malawi is able to produce food for its population in a manner that is supporting their nutrition and diet demands. So that's from the programmatic point of view. In terms of evidence, we have the National Research Agenda, which I believe most of the stakeholders now should access. You can get it on www.npc.mw. That National Research Agenda is outlined along the pillars and enablers of Malawi 2063. Why? This is an agenda that has to service the development interventions of the country, to provide evidence that should guide design of programs, to provide evidence that should guide prioritization of programs. So the National Research Agenda outlines in pillar number 1, which is agriculture, productivity and commercialization, it outlines a set of research priorities and interventions within the agriculture sector. A lot of building capacities in climate smart agriculture, early warning systems, coming up with innovative inputs in the agriculture sector that should facilitate an optimal productivity of the sector itself. So there are all those kind of research outlines and research themes and research focus areas within the pillar of agriculture, productivity and commercialization that are geared towards addressing the key information and data gaps with regards to the agriculture sector. And I must be honest that I'm proud that the nation decided to provide a proper direction in terms of agricultural research in this country, one that is aligned to the national priorities in terms of development. And my request to all stakeholders sitting around is that we need to consult this strategic document so that our research has got a ready, available space for uptake, because it is answering to the key questions and information needs that we are looking for to address the challenges that we are facing as a country in terms of augmenting agriculture. I think I would leave it there for the time being, giving it space for you guys to reflect, and perhaps maybe there are subsequent questions. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you, Andrew. Just a follow-up question from that. So you've mentioned several programs, such as the irrigation, the mega farms, and you've also mentioned the National Research Agenda, which gives us an opportunity to prioritize and adapt programs around food systems. Could you also just speak to some of the strides that we have made in terms of generating evidence that can be used to prioritize programs or adapt programs that we have as a country?
Great. Thank you very much, moderator. One of the great strides that we have managed to actually achieve is to support the generation of evidence that is resulting into facilitating of policies and perhaps maybe enactments in Parliament and bills associated with programming in the agriculture sector. A recent of which would be the seed bill that is already about to be assented the seed bill is a result of extensive research that's been done in terms of cost-benefit analysis, the issues of environmental aspects associated with it, piloted and really driven by stakeholders in the agriculture sector. I know of Mapata Institute, Luana, that have been instrumental, as well as the Commission itself, in providing, information that should, guide into the decision making around the seed bill. So this is one of the key, milestones that the country has forged forward. Why am I proud about this? Because we cannot talk about food production without seeds. So we are looking at what kind of seeds we should look at in terms of transforming the agriculture sector. Given the climatic variability, the challenges associated with our reduced capacities to produce, what kind of seeds would fit within the context of our capacities, both in terms of incomes, both in terms of climate, and all other challenges that the country seems to be facing within the agriculture sector. Again, when we talk about climate smart agriculture, the University of Science and Technology is also moving forward to operationalize some of the research aspects to do with managing, generating, kind of energy. So there are technicians that are working around coming up with alternative energy to support, efforts towards reducing food loss, particularly to do with perishables. We're talking about perishables like, livestock perishables like milk, even beef itself, and also maybe vegetables, tomatoes, and so on and so forth. There are technologies, energy technologies that are being piloted in the space to support the provision of, requisite environment within which you can prevent food losses. As you know, that food loss is one of the key challenges that Malawi is actually encountering, from the field even onto the table. So there are all these kind of technologies that are actually in the offing and being supported both by government and our development partners in our institutions of higher learning, as well as other centers of excellence, to support generation of alternatives and innovations that should facilitate what we are looking at.
Thank you, Andrew. Would like to...
Connectivity?
No, you're okay.
Right, thank you, Andrew. We'll now open up the floor for questions. So the audience in the room, if you'd have questions for our panelists. Do we have a microphone in the room?
Hello.
Thank you so much. I have a question related to the mega farms. It has been mentioned that mega farms is one of the initiatives that the country is going into to ensure that there is safe reliance. So my question is, how would we make sure that the mega farms do not monopolize the food system at the expense of the small-scale farmers? Because the small-scale farmers, which form a major part of food production in Malawi, and are also the ones that usually go hungry during the lean season. So, if we have the mega farms, they will monopolize the food system. Would that have an influence on the small-scale farmers? And also, how would we take account into issues to do with environment, protecting the environment, since they will be doing a production on a mass scale? Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. There's another hand in the back.
Thank you so much, both panelists. My question is, in the absence of the signing of the bill, how do we plan to move forward? Because next year we are having elections. So if we're still struggling, it might mean the next 25 years we do not have the nutrition bill. So what is the plan for us to move forward? And then the next question is, in most of the districts that are dry and flooded in Malawi, we find a lot of rivers that flow through those districts. What are our plans to ensure that these districts do not suffer from the hunger that we are seeing currently? Because once it starts raining, the places are flooded. Once it stops raining, the places have malnutrition and hunger. So what are we doing? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Charles Govat. I think I will big ride on her just to raise a question that you need to address. For us in private sector and behind the issue of mega farms and commercialization of production of the staple diet, maize and other cereals, the issue that is at conflict is, it seems the policies or the way government handles it or the politics handles it is they equate food security to food self-sufficiency. We in the private sector believe that we can play a role on the food self-sufficiency side of it, not on the food security. So that we make sure that as Malawi, we have the maize that we require as a nation, okay? And that private sector can participate directly with minimum intervention, just requires access to finance and all those things, so that the maize is available. The issue of food security is an issue that now is handled by the various ministries. But it looks that the dialogue or the way we play these things is that government tends to equate food security and self-sufficiency kind of mix. And I think probably you as policy people can look at it probably and enlighten us. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we can stop there for now and respond to, I think, the 3, if not 4 questions that we have. So for the first one, maybe we can start with Andrew. Is he online? No. Okay. Yeah, in any case, I think 2 parts to that question. So I think Julius might also be able to respond. So on the issue of agriculture commercialization, so how to ensure that mega farms do not monopolize the food systems and also leave the smallholder farmers vulnerable. I think there was also a question on the same to do with how to ensure that we are also safeguarding the environment at the same time. So maybe you can start, Julius.
Yeah, thank you. I will attempt 2 questions. The first part of mega farms versus small-scale producers, I think it's still a question that all of us needs to think through it, because we're talking about a national agenda that has already been set. And we're already seeing movements, and even on the political arena, there's all talk about mega farms, and that already tells you a story. So it's a bigger issue that we all need to think through on how best we can support our government to actually balance the two between advancing mega farms and also ensuring that the small-scale producers can also play a role in terms of ensuring that we have, food security and availability in the country. So I might not have the exhaustive answers to this, but I think it requires a platform where we need to share ideas on how best this can be balanced up. We know it's also a question of land ownership, and so on. We've seen where the buzz about mega farms is also resulting into small-scale producers losing land to these companies and everyone else who is now buying into the issue of mega farms, which is something that that's why I'm saying it's a bigger conversation that even goes beyond just agricultural sector. It has to do with land. It has to do with all other sectors to be on the table so that we see how best this can be balanced. But it has an impact. The question that Mr. Govert raised about food self-sufficiency and security, also it plays a role in that regard, because we are talking about how do we want to produce, or how do we want to make just food available, but not really maybe looking at other elements of food security within it. So whether, I mean, as he has correctly described it, the private sector has a role to support us to ensure that we have those, we have the food self-sufficiency. But do we have the right policies to ensure that this is done in a manner that we are moving towards food sovereignty, for example? Because this is also a question that we need to be raising. It's not only about food security, but we also need to look at the elements of food sovereignty. Who is supposed to produce the food for us? I think there was a talk about the seed policy. I think for quite some time, even when we the initial discussions about when this bill was not referred to as food and nutrition bill, it used to be the right to food bill. I think we were talking about the same issues. How do we ensure that we address the issues of farmers' rights, on how they also want to be part and parcel of even producing seed, and also seed that can help us to produce food that is nutritious, not just flooding the market with any other food because we want to have food on the table, but we want to have food that can actually address our needs both ways, nutrition-wise and even meeting our needs in terms of the finances and so on. The question of environmental management in the context of mega farms. We have laws in the country, Environmental Management Act, and even regulations that should help us to address some of these issues. We have regulations and guidelines that helps us to actually to support those that want to invest in bigger projects like mega farms, to even undergo, for example, environmental and social impact assessment. And at the end of the day, we're supposed to come up with the, ways on how we want to address some of the impacts that can come as a result of an intervention. So we have those. We can ride on those. The challenge is what my colleague was actually talking about. Laws are there, but sometimes how we want to implement them, it's very challenging. It can be sometimes selective kind of implementation of the policies or laws. You find that others who are making an investment, let's say on a mega farm, they're going through the whole process. At the end of the day, they are given the certificate of the EIA certificate, and they can implement accordingly. Others might not go through the process because for political reasons, they are politically connected and so on, and that jeopardizes the whole element of environmental management, because the idea is not to say no to an investment like a mega farm, but to say this is the way you want to manage it, so that once you are also advancing the element of food and nutrition in the country, we also need to preserve and conserve the environment that forms the bedrock for our agriculture system. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Julius. Maybe we can just carry on, since you had the mic, to the next question, which is concerning disaster-prone areas. So where we have flooding and right after maybe we have dry spells. What is the plan for such areas as we move forward in terms of ensuring the right to food?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, I already indicated that we are seriously being impacted by weather and climate-related events. And that would mean, as we go on, as according to the IPCC, the Governmental Panel on Climate Change, still predicts that we will still have, impacts. We'll still have those events happening at a very, intense, situation, but also even they will multiply themselves as we go forward. So it means some of the areas, for example, might not be habitable. Some of the areas might not be the right places for us to invest in, for example, to do agriculture. In that case, one thing that needs to happen at the moment, because already the government has already started to move in terms of, enacting some of the laws, for example, the Disaster Risk Management Act, which is trying to help us to now map out the whole country into, trying to identify what hazards, what risks are, available in the different areas in the country, but also identify those high-risk areas where you can actually say these are areas that can no longer be habitable, or these are areas that can no longer be, agriculture cannot be done, and so on and so forth. If that can be done systematically and everyone else understands, I think we might be able to identify which areas we can do, comfortably. We can do agriculture without any disruptions with flooding or and any others sorts. But that doesn't mean we are not saying some of those areas cannot be, you cannot do agriculture. For example, the areas that receives flooding every year, now, those can also actually benefit from climate smart agriculture. This is why we are saying there are all these interventions that needs to be done in areas that can actually accommodate them. If you, for example, in areas that are flooded, you might want to intensify some forms of agriculture. For example, the irrigation farming or any other agriculture that benefits from residual moisture in such kind of areas. So we need to actually understand the geology. We need to understand the climate risks, the hazards, and plan accordingly so that we are able to do agriculture that can actually fit into the context of a situation or an area. Thank you.
Thank you. For Alfred, we have one last question from the last round of questions. How do we move forward without the bill being passed?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, and it's the basis why we are here, because we are here to deliberate about these issues and recommend in terms of what we do after this. But suffice to say that the political situation now, the fact that won't be going into general elections offers also an opportunity to basically lobby for this to those that are to be contending for the high office. So I think it's not a time to lose hope. The meeting here is also there to re-energize ourselves that we don't really have to come to a point where all hope is lost. So as towards the end of this meeting, we'll be sharing ideas and recommendations in terms of how we move forward. We also have to look at the positives rather than to be disparate for the fact that we have come from afar and there has not been enough progress. I think that's what I would actually say.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add, Julius? Okay. Do we have any other questions in the room? I know there was a hand in the back. Stacia?
Thank you. I have more of a comment, and I wish Andrew was here. I was nodding my head and so happy with what you guys were saying on diversification, especially using the land the way that it can be used. I really wanted Andrew to talk about mega farms. Oh, Andrew, hello, Mr. Jamali. I really wanted you to comment on what is grown in the mega farms. What is in the seed bill? Because there were a lot of us that were talking about the issues with the seed bill and how it was continuing us on a very narrow agriculture, mostly for maize seed and a few other little things. It's the balance that's off. So if you look at the picture behind your head, that's a beautiful balanced picture. And it's Zakujis Oceanasiana za Malawi. I see some things actually from Malawi there as well. I was very, very sad this morning as we were talking about our own indigenous foods in Malawi and then it being connected to what people want to eat. So we're forgetting our own foods in Malawi and wanting just one food from America, which is maize. It's American. And all of our policies are pushing in that direction, and then we say, well, we have to give people what they want. There's timati chicken and an egg, eh? Who's going to change between them? We started the problem. How do we face this? You know, and what we're eating here matters too. If we're eating all these wonderful diverse foods, people watch us practicing what we preach. So Andrew, it really went back to you. I don't know if you heard some of what Julius and Alfred were saying about diversification. I would be behind mega farms if they were diverse. But if they continue just to push out more maize, more fertilizer, then I have an issue. Tatokoza.
Right. We have a...
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to contribute. I have two contributions to make. I think basically it will be a mixture. Comments and questions, maybe you'll classify what they are at the end. Yeah, I'll begin with what I wanted to say when you were getting some feedback from the first round, because I wanted to also contribute something there. When that gentleman was eloquently giving us some information about the research work and what is being done to ensure that we get the best services and, of course, the right products for us to ensure the right to food is fulfilled. Yeah, I wanted the contributor perhaps to share with us what matters. It looks like there is too much happening at national level, and at one point we always argue to say there's too much at the center and there's nothing at the bottom, and we expect to make progress. It has never worked anywhere like that. We have to balance. We have to make sure that whatever we are doing at the center gets its way down to the ground so that it affects the lives of people. If it doesn't get there, then we are just shooting nowhere. The research which the contributor was sharing with us is mostly generation of kind of innovations and ideas which, in my view, are not informed by the actual issues on the ground. We have a lot of programs in this country which are not working, simply because we have no answers for the problems which those programs are facing. For instance, we started a couple of years ago investing a lot in subsidies. We just give them different names. This time around it's AIP, PCP, TIP, whatever. And I know it will be something else in the future. But the issue is, why is it that after all that investment we are making, we are not getting the results that we want? And yet theories promise us the best. I was thinking that if we were to do some research for progress, we should have been finding answers for those things. Beyond that, I also feel that the way the research agenda is set also leaves a lot to be desired. Because most of the innovations which our colleague was sharing with us, I don't know what drives that, but quickly I can say they are mostly driven by maybe academic proponents or stuff like that. But the issue is we have people that are working on the ground to produce the food, and they are experiencing a lot of problems. Problems in seed, problems in practices, and problems even in terms of how to manage their entire production process. We don't have answers in those things. Over and above that, whatever we have heard here about the research is not connected to extension. You can have very good innovations at the center, but if you don't have proper ways of taking those innovations down to the people who are supposed to use them, it is just as good as wasting the money, because they will never be used. So I thought that this would be something that should be looked into, making sure that we get the impression that we are driving the research that is going to answer the problems that the people that are producing the food are facing, so that when we deal with the problems, we should be able to get the results that we are looking for. Just a small comment on the mega farms. Yes, mega farms are a way to go now. We are involved in implementing that, and we have made some tremendous progress elsewhere. But I think there are some things that we need also to look into. We are coming from a background where we used to have similar things. I think my colleagues in front there can agree with me that we had the state sector and the smallholder sector. The state sector is more or less like the mega farms we are doing now. And how things are this time around, I don't see a marked difference. It's almost that. But the thing is, in Malawi, the largest proportion of farmers and the largest contributor of food in this country are the smallholder farmers. So even if we tilt the investments and go to the mega farms, with the hope that the mega farms are going to give us more, what is likely to happen is that you will have food in this country, but it will be very expensive. Because the mega farms, the way I know them, there are things that are driven by intentions maybe to make profit at a certain point. So our farmers, most of the times, are rescued from that kind of expensive food, because they produce the food which they consume themselves. They don't mostly get their food from the market. So as we advance the mega farms, let us also understand that we have a certain group of people there, which is large in number and has influence in the food production. We should not be neglected, because if we neglect that large group of people, the consequences will be serious. I just wanted to contribute that. Thank you so much.
Right, thank you. Can we have Andrew to respond to the first question? Okay.
First of all, I want to put on notice my senior chief here to give us a statement on the relationship of how they use CDF funds in order to promote this food security and rights to food at a constituency level, because that's where they are operating. So I just want to put him on notice. My question is food security related to national security? If it is yes, then why is it that we discuss food security on a podium? Because national security is handled by Minister of Defense. Why is it that we allow people to discuss food security at a political rally when they are not allowed to discuss how many guns we have in the army? I wanted us to address that issue. Secondly, is the right to food equal to the right to food security? Because there is also that disconnect there. Is the right to food discussion meaning that we are discussing food security? The other issue is on IPE. Somebody mentioned about IPE. For you to understand IPE, you look at the beneficiary. I am in that business. I was working for Yara since 1996, and in 2010, Yara exited in participating in IPE because of what was happening. They couldn't continue. Okay? The issue is who is benefiting. They noticed that the beneficiary of IPE was not the farmer. It was the logistical companies. So the people who make money out of IPE, never cheat yourself that it is the farmer. Profit in the fertilizer industry does not exceed 6%. And if you are reaching 6%, it means you got your own transport and your own warehousing. You can't make 10% profit on fertilizer business. Okay? That is a fact. Now, I want to bring you back to the last conference last week. I want you to reflect on it. Rex, who was a facilitator, summarized the first day with the 5 S's. I think those of people you who were there remember them. The 5 S's, the 5 takeaways. They were systems, scale, speed, strategic partnerships, and sustainability. In the Right to Food Coalition, how do you embrace these 5 S's? Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you. We can have Andrew respond to the first question, or the questions around the mega farms, diversification.
Right. First of all, let me find out if I am audible enough.
Yes, you are audible.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah, so my quickest reaction to most of the sentiments, I would not call them questions, but I think they are points of reflection. Most of the programs that we are actually doing now as a country, aligned to maybe our strategic development milestones and plans, are initiatives that might have been there in the past, but we are just now trying to augment or redesign them to fit within the context that Malawi is operating on. They may not have been done well. I mean, you can go down to the Vision 2020 review. It will show you how each of the sectors, each of the programs performed, and that's why this time around there's kind of a strategic shift towards these kind of things, these kind of programs that are in place. And the issues that are emerging from the flow are genuine reflections, which really, as technicians on the ground, we need to reflect. And this reflection has to go on across the implementation space, because it's not only at a design level where we have to think about what kind of impactful designs we should be putting in place, but again, what kind of monitoring in these designs if they are effectively addressing the challenges that we are talking about. So I look at all the comments that have been shared here as points of reflection, both to do with the seed deal, how diverse it is in terms of capturing the indigenous, seeds, food systems, the issue of making sure that all the key players in the food, in the food systems are actually having a key role, that is also transformative enough and impactful in generating food for the country, in food sovereignty, self-food sufficiency, optimizing incomes. All those elements are actually factored into. The key issue is, how do we get this operationalized? So we are already in our baby steps to do with mega farms, as I can say that. But there are so many issues that are coming that needs to put our eyes on so that we can address them. The issue of making sure that the local farmer is taking part. I mean, the Minister of Agriculture has always been that we have farmers that actually have paraded themselves to provide, the services in terms of mega farms. That's an inclusive aspect of this mega farm initiative. I know that there would be profit orientation to do it large scale, farming corporations and the like, but within the design of the mega farm initiative is to make sure that Malawi's strategic goals in terms of food production, augmenting commercialization are actually the highlight. So the issue now as stakeholders is to make sure that we question and we keep our eye on how we are progressing towards these strategic milestones. And I look at these as very noble comments and very good reflection points that as we engage in these spaces, we look at the programs, we reflect on how we are moving in the direction that we've charted. I think that's how I would respond to these comments. Basically, they were points of reflection. They were not questions to be answered, a lot of which may also be sentiments that need to be, factual, supported by evidence in terms of research that should really ground the views so much they can drive the prioritization, the redesigning, and the rethinking as we are implementing these programs towards transforming our agriculture and food systems. I mean, that would be
Right, so we've lost Andrew again, and I think the other questions, especially in terms of how to translate policy research into, for example, extension services, would have been best also responded to by Andrew, but I would also maybe allow the other two panelists if you might have any reflections around that as well.
Yeah, thank you. Just to agree with the colleague who raised the question, I think I was part of some of the meetings that were happening around the issue of setting up the research agenda for the country. I think we've been raising so many questions around this. I think you also raised a very important question of what is being, there's too much that is happening, but there's little on the ground, which when you look at the agenda, I mean the research agenda, but also you look at what interventions are also happening, you equate it to what you want to get on the ground. It's literally, there's a mismatch. For example, we've been raising the issue of how many pilots are we going to do in the country to save the food situation, for example. How many pilots are we going to do in the agriculture sector that will actually help us to move towards food security and even to do with food and climate resilience and so on. I mean, for the last 20 years, I don't know how many interventions we can check that different players, including the Minister of Agriculture, have actually piloted, and those have resulted into us adopting them as, these are national programs that we need to actually now, sustain in the different agroecological zones in the country. And with that, you look at how much resources we are actually pumping into all those programs, pilots, research, agendas, but we literally are getting nothing. So I think somehow we're missing a point in terms of our research agenda. If we are to define it properly, we can actually, improve the situation on the ground. And actually, the question of, linking even the research agenda to extension is something that we also need to reflect upon, because this is something that is also clearly coming out as a mismatch. So I just wanted to agree to the questions and the sentiments. I cannot expand more, but also just to give examples of what is happening on the ground, particularly on how we are missing up on some of the things in terms of putting initiatives in order on the ground. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. I think we are out of time. So just in closing, one last question. And I would also ask our panelists to also respond in Chichewa so that we can also all be able to follow. Within our spheres of influence, what is it that we need to do to transform the food systems within Malawi?
Yeah, fusoli ine ndi ankha ngati mmodzi wa anthu amene akulimbikitsa za nkhani ya ufulu wa chakudya. Tikamakakamba nkhani ya kusintha kwa mmene nkhani ndi ya chakudya iyenera ndi kukhalira. Kwambiri tikamalankhula izizi sitiziyang'ana mbali ndi ya ufulu ndi wa chakudya. Ndiyeno omwina ndemanga imene ndikufuna kulankhula ndionena kuti tikamakamba nkhani ya food systems transformation yoyang'ana mmene tingasinthire nkhani zokutsana ndi chakudya. Tikuyenera kuti nkhani ndi ya ufulu tisamayichotse pamene tikuganiza za nkhani iyi. Chifukwa chonena kuti zikhoza kutheka kunena kuti tikhoza kupanga transform food system yathu nkukhala ndi zakudya zokwanira mu dziko. Komano kukhala ndi chakudya chokwanira mu dziko sikuthandauza kuti chakudyacho chikufikira ndi aliyense. Amene popo ndi pamene nkhani za ufulu zimabwerera. Ndiyeno tikuyenera kuti nthawi imene tikuganizira zopanga transform food system yo tiyang'anenso maufulu a anthu kwambiri kwa anthu amene mwina si amwayi ngati mene ambiri ife tilili, chifukwa chonena kuti ambiri ife tili munofe ndo anena kuti tili pa mulingo ndiwina wake onena kuti ma rights athu okay maufulu athu okusana ndi nkhani ndi zakudya ndiwosavuta kuwafikira. Komano tili ndi anthu onena kuti ufulu ndiwachakudyawo ukanawavuta. Ndiye nthawi imene tikuyang'ana this systematic change ati tikuyeneranso kuganizira vulnerability ndi anthu amene ufulu ukuwatalikira zikomo.
Okay, kumbali yanga ndiona kuti ndigwirizane ndi zimene wayankhula Alfred. Nkhani ya ufulu ndiyofunika kuti tikwaniritse makamaka cholinga chimene tikufuna pofunisisa kuti munthu aliyense akhale ndi chakudya, koma osati kungokhala ndi chakudya chabe, koma chikhale chakudya choti chitha kumuthandiza kupezanso zina ndi zina zimene zimasowekera mthupi la munthu komanso pa khomo pa munthu ngakhalenso dziko tikwaniritse. Pali zambiri zimene zikuyenera kuti zichitike ngati ife amene tili mabungwe oti saboma tilibikisabe kumakamaka mikumana imene ngakhalepo pakati pa anthu ndi boma kuti nkhani za malamulo komanso nkhani zokhuzana ndi ndondomeko za boma zizikhala zoyankhula zimene anthu akufuna, makamaka zizipanganso promote zinthu zimene zikufunikiradi mu dziko, koma kuti tionesesanso kuti tisalimbikise nchitidwe oti boma lizikhala lingokopera zimene zikuchitika kwina kwake nkumazibweresa kuno zimene zitha kuphinjaso anthu. Tinamva zitsanzo apo kuti mwina zakudya zimene timagwisa ntchito timadya si za ku Malawi kuno, koma zakudya zathu ndi akudya ndani. So timafuna kuti zinthu ngati zimenezi zikhala kuti mapolisi athu ndi amene aziyankhula za zimene ife tikuyenera kuti tizikhala tikupanga promote. Takhala kwa nthawi yayitali tikuona kuti kwa agriculture atu si sector yokuti ndalama imamanidwa kwambiri mdziko muno, koma kuti tiyang'ane kuti kodi ma priorities athu ndi otani kuti agriculture makamaka ma systems asinthe azithaso kumakhala akuyankha zimene anthu akufuna, makamaka tikuyang'ananso nkhani ya kusintha kwa nyengo. Siting'anamizane zaka zadusa ndikumbukira budget session ina yake ya chaka chatha wina anadandaula kuti ifeyo agriculture since 1960 chani yakhale kupasidwa ndalama zochuluka koma sitimaona kusintha kwina kulikonse. Kodi vuto ndi chani? Tifuna tilimbikise kuyankhulana kumene kuti mwina tipeze mavuto amene alipo kuti transformation izikhala yeniyeni osati yongoti mmene afotokozera anzathu kuti lese tikangoti AIP ndiye kuti farmer weniweni sakupanga benefit. Akupanga benefit ni munthu wina. Izi zimene zikupangisanso kuti ma systems athu asasinthe chifukwa choti mwina reallocation ya ma resources sikuyenda bwino. Ziko.
Zikomo kwambiri. So this marks the end of this panel discussion. We have one last panel discussion after lunch with the right holders. Thank you, our panelists, for participating, and for Andrew for participating online, and for the audience for your contributions. I think there was one outstanding question which was supposed to be responded by our senior chief, and so the panel discussion that we have in the afternoon which is for the right holders. I think the senior chief can respond to that question during that session. Thank you all.
Thank you, Fundi, and all the panelists, Alfred, Julius, as well as Dr. Andrew Jamali. May we give them another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Agambankani Zambired, Alwanso Mwambili, Ndukuboti, Nchifage Mwina, Anagomedwa, Komanso Donset Nagomedwa, Nchifage Mwina Dafigaba. That's the whole essence of a dialogue into Ugambirana. So I think it's all good and it's healthy for all of us, but also for the progress that we want to make as a country, as a sector, but also as a society. So we still have got a couple of items to exhaust on the agenda. I think a little later in the day, we'll be having another panel involving our local leaders and things like that. We'll also have some breakaway sessions where we'll now confront these issues head on and see what sort of recommendations we can isolate and come up with so that we can continue the engagement until we get to the destination that we all want. So it's been a very, very packed morning, transitioning now into the afternoon. I would like to appreciate all of you for your attention, but also active participation. Lots of issues have already come up, and it's also quite encouraging to notice the passion that seems to be within ourselves to make sure there is progress in this country, and I think that's the only way we can indeed make progress around this issue. Once again, it is apparent that we are behind schedule. 2030 is around the corner. We are racing against time. Our people are still food insecure. We cannot keep watching. We need to do something. It's not just about the government, it's about all of us. This is why we are dialoguing and engaging. And it is also apparent that the bill has overstayed wherever it is. We need to do all we can to make sure that it is passed in Parliament, and it should be able now to be in form of a law so that we can make use of it as a country. And if Malawi is going to accelerate our food systems agenda, we probably need this kind of piece of legislation to push progress. We have also acknowledged a couple of challenges, I think, as a sector, but we have also really recognized that there are some positive things that are already happening, and we can build on those in order to have a solid and sustainable future that will benefit our economies, our people, and everyone involved. So I want you to give yourselves a huge round of applause for being productive and also for being so attentive to get to where we are now. I hope we will not lose you. We still need you in the afternoon, so please come back in good time. And I think the afternoon part is actually very, very important, because that's what is going to define the way forward. What is it that you're going to do, having discussed or talked about all the issues that we have talked about since morning? It's 1 o'clock. We'll have a lunch break for about an hour. Lunch, I'm sure all of us have got our lunch tickets or coupons by now. Lunch will be served in the other building, main entrance to the auditorium, and then you have to turn to the right corridor. I'm told it's a HR corridor, closer to where we have the auditorium stage. The secretariat colleagues will also guide us accordingly. It's not at the usual main foyer where we usually go. I think it's the other side of the building. So please take note of that and keep time. By 2 o'clock, rather, we should be here so that we can proceed with the rest of the items on the agenda. If there is nothing else, Thanks so much. And I was told that there are some golf shirts for all of us, which will be distributed in the next session. So don't miss that golf shirt. It was made for you, and make sure you get it. Enjoy your lunch. We'll see you again after an hour. Thank you very much, Annette.